Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the Brawley City Council and Successor Agency to the Brawley Community Redevelopment Agency to order. Regular meeting for Tuesday, March 17th at 6 p.m. We can have roll call, please.
The minutes will reflect all council members present.
Thank you. The invocation will be by Pastor Tom Dowdy from First American Assembly of God.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, God of all the earth, we thank you for your many abundant blessings in our lives and in our fine city. You are the source of all life. You are the source of true purpose. And tonight we honor you, asking you to be glorified in this meeting by a spirit of cooperation and peace. We pray for our mayor, for each city council member, all Brawley city officials elected and appointed. And we ask that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern fairly and justly. Grant them a sense of welfare for all the people of Brawley. Grant them for a heart of justice and rightness. Grant them unity and harmony. And grant each of them personal peace and joy, Lord. We pray for the agenda set before them tonight. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live in Brawley and around this fine city. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Pastor. Our Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Lloyd Miller, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Pastor. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and there is an item that I would like to clarify, and that's regular business item G. It doesn't state the fund of that project. It's from the Wastewater Capital Projects Fund, but I would like to pull an item I, regular business, discussion potential action to approve purchase and installation of a diesel particulate filter for dump truck number 26 and the amount of $14,476.79. That amount falls within the authority of administrative staff, and they will handle that administratively. So I would like to pull item I. So I would make a motion to approve the agenda with those corrections and clarifications.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I oppose.
So there was 4.
I said no.
Okay,
No.
so the 4 yes and no. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public appearances, comments not to exceed 4 minutes. This is the time for the public to address the council on any item not appearing on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city council. The mayor will recognize you, and when you come to the microphone, please state your name for the record. You are not allowed to make personal attacks on individuals or make comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy. Please direct your questions and comments to the city council. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to make a comment on any item not appearing on the agenda?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council and staff. Jason Zara, Brawley Chamber of Commerce. As always, I want to start out by saying thank you to everyone for another successful farmers market. Saturday, our attendance was down a little bit with the air show to compete with, and it got really hot out there unexpectedly, but it was still a beautiful day. We have one more farmers market to go this season. It's going to be April 11th, and we're looking forward to partnering up for the Cesar Chavez celebration that's just going to immediately follow, so it should be a really exciting day. Once again, we couldn't do it all without the help from the city staff. The guys have been incredible. Grateful to everyone for that. The other thing I'd like to mention briefly is this Friday at noon at the Chamber, we're having our first quarterly business forum. Interestingly enough, this actually came out of the same conversation that launched your town hall meeting, and this was kind of the Chamber's take on the same answer, and the timing just worked out to be the same week. So Thursday night, everyone can come out and speak to their officials, and then Friday at noon, we can come to the chamber for some follow-up and talk about what kind of issues you'd like to see pursued, what questions might come out of it, and where we can go in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason, thank you. And it did get a little warm Saturday, but
Right.
the food was still good.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a public appearance or comment? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Items are approved by one motion. Council members or members of the public may request consent items be considered separately at a time determined by the mayor. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda with the items that was mentioned to be pulled originally.
And that was on regular business, but yes, there's a motion to approve consent. Is there a second to that?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion and potential action to adopt first reading of ordinance number 2015, ordinance of the City Council, the City of Brawley, California, establishing a business license fee for vendors at city-sanctioned events.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Ruby Walla, Finance Director. In your packets and what you are reviewing and up for your approval tonight is an ordinance prepared in coordination with our city attorney regarding a business license fee for vendors for city-sanctioned events. If you recall, back in September, we came to City Council and it was just a discussion item or an informational item that the chamber had brought to our attention. The fees, business license fees associated with farmers markets. We treat them as peddlers. As you know, we charge peddlers $35 per day according to our business license fee ordinance. With that being said, and just a summary is that with those vendors that participate in farmers markets, $35 a day is a pretty hefty fee over the series of the farmers markets for them to pay and for them to make some type of profit, whether if it's, selling fruits and vegetables or selling crafts or whatever it may be. So the chamber approached us with, is there another, like an event permit? So what was proposed is that allow vendors to sell at city-sanctioned events, farmers markets, cattle call, car shows, and sports tournaments, and anything on city property. However, so what we did through council discussion, it was also brought about at that time, the Business Advisory Committee was formed, and this was an item that should be taken before the Business Advisory Committee. They had lengthy discussion on the topic of peddlers and so forth, so they provided a recommendation to go with the Chamber's recommendation about the city-sanctioned events having an annual fee of $35 for the series, which would run for the sequence of the farmers markets, or in this case, those participating in these cities, what is now defined as city-sanctioned events, but excluding Cattle Call Week. Because during those discussions, pretty much during Cattle Call Week, we all know what type of turnout you get for Cattle Call Week versus a farmers, once-a-month farmers market. Right. So the ordinance reflects basically that detail as far as this, the annual permit, and it's set per fiscal year, and it's defined there that it runs for the fiscal year at $35 per year. Any cattle call participants then would fall into our current business license fee according to section 16.86. And that's pretty much it regarding the ordinance. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions from council?
I just have a comment, Mr. Mayor. I had the opportunity to be part of these discussions with Brawley Business Advisory Committee, and definitely we spent time on this topic, among others. But one of the things to kind of point out, in case some might be thinking, hey, there's some city fees or revenues that are not going to be collected, but it was certainly determined we want to support these events, these multiple events that have been going on. Some which are relatively new, like Farmers Market. When I mean new, the rebirth of Farmers Market, coming back to Brawley. Whatever may be missed, I really think is going to be gained by creating the attraction that we have, and more people are certainly circulating through the downtown area probably than the previous couple years. So we're excited about that. I think it was a good decision on a recommendation by Brawley Business Advisory Committee, and I support it myself.
And I think also it's important to note that these are small businesses, small organizations that are participating, so we certainly want to encourage them to participate, and that was one of the comments made by the chamber, that some felt it was high to be able to participate on a per event basis. So certainly addresses that concern, and I hope to see further participation by vendors and those wishing to participate at the farmers market. So,
And some of these are nonprofits, so it kind of help them too.
is there any other comments, questions from council? Seeing none. All right. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion to approve. There's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby.
The next item on the agenda is discussion and potential action to amend resolution number 2014-36, increasing the membership of the Business Advisory Committee from 5 to 7 members. And I asked for this item to be brought back before council. As you know, when we started the Business Advisory Committee, that was several years ago, and we had a difficult time gaining membership to the committee, and so I think we struggled to get the 5 members. It was initially 7 members. We reduced it to 5 to fill the spots, and now that it has formed and they're engaged and they're participating in the different decisions, there's increased interest. So I would like to open it back up to 7 members and get a broad spectrum of participants, whether they be business owners or managers or just members of the community, to participate in the Business Advisory Committee. So I bring it before council for discussion and action.
Will these 2 that you're going to bring forth, are they going to, their term will be extended to end at the same time as the other 5?
It would be open to point 12 months. They'd be appointed for 12 months, whatever that period ending would be. So,
I believe Rosanna was shaking her head over there.
It might help to take a look at page 85. It says the 2, at least as written,
okay.
with the assistance of the city attorney, it states the 2 additional members shall serve the same term of office as the original 5. Said term shall expire on June 30, 2016.
Okay, so we'll do it that way. But the term would be 12-month term, or is it a period of time?
It is
So-
a period that's scheduled to end.
And, okay.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, then it would end at the same time that the other members, right? But I think they've only been formed officially for 2 months. Couple months. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
if I might suggest as we move through this, at one point in time, you may wish to stagger those terms so that you don't have everybody leaving all at once and coming
Right.
back on, so that you would have some continuity of history and something as it moves along. Now, right now,
Right.
it's too newly formed to maybe do that, but as you move along and appoint new members, you may wish to stagger terms
Change
so
the
that,
terms.
so that 3 members are leaving at one time, 4 members are leaving at one time, and so it's different, so there's like maybe a
Absolutely.
year or a 6-month or whatever you want to do, gap in that changeover, because that will give you some history and continuity, so you don't have to start all over again,
Right.
brand new. So
And with it being 7 members, that would be,
It's easier
whether
to
it's
do.
3 and 4 or whatever that may be. But that certainly is a great suggestion.
Perhaps when you appoint your 2 members, you could give staff direction to have an additional update to this resolution to reflect that staggered term. It'd be a simple matter to do that and start right away.
Okay. We'll have to see how we address it because there are current serving members, so certainly.
Because there's only 2 months difference between.
Right,
you
between
have
the 2.
options to look at, you know.
Very well.
I make the motion that we increase the Business Advisory Committee from 5 to 7.
I second that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is regular business 4C, discussion potential staff direction regarding color palettes in the downtown specific plan area.
Thank you, Mayor Nava. This evening, we have a brief presentation. This began with a request from Councilmember Noriega to review the pallets that are in place per city ordinance. So what we thought would be useful, based on a number of emerging issues on Main Street, was to do two things in this presentation. Number one is explain what our policy used to be relative to the Brawley Redevelopment Agency, which we know has been dissolved and is no longer in effect. And then part two is to talk about the downtown-specific plan and what policy is part of ordinance as a result of the downtown-specific plan. And Gordon has thankfully prepared the content for today. I'll have him walk through it with council.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Gordon Gase, Planning Director. Good evening. Oops, sorry. Back here. The original. There we go. The original. What's the word I want to say? Not law, really. The original guidance that we used to use for the colors that we had downtown was the redevelopment agency colors. They're listed here. They were actually pretty specific on the brand and everything. Of course, this company is actually not in business anymore. So what we did after they went out, Francisco was nice enough to have his staff go get matching colors. They had those in their database, so we could actually match them with a company that's in existence now. Again, if you read here, though, it doesn't say shall use. It says, they should use these colors. It never was anything that was 100% mandatory.
Right.
So when people would come in, we would recommend these colors to them and say, okay, this is the palette you have to choose from. And so there's your base colors, and there's also your primer that they recommend that you use, so it stays on longer. It gets a little technical. But this is basically the palette that you had. And what you see is basically is your base colors for your the biggest part of your building, your fascia, your front, and then your trim colors that you could use. And it's a pretty big variety, and a lot of times, there's some companies that are national that have some unusual colors in their brand that they want to use. So this pretty much covers a lot of those different colors, or at least a shade. And we'd usually let them go up. We had the whole color palette, so we'd usually let them go up one shade or go down one shade from what was on the samples. So that was the original one. And like I said, we would encourage them to use these colors when they would come in and state that they were going to paint their building. So then with the downtown specific plan came in, and it in general, a lot of it stayed kind of the same. What we had is we stated using desert palette colors and earth tone colors. So standard palette, everywhere I've looked, these are probably the biggest ones that you could see the best would be. And like I said, this is actually from the ordinance. It says earth tone desert palette should be utilized, however, accent colors are encouraged. You want it to stand out a little bit. You don't want to look down Main Street and have it look like, the Soviet Union or something like that. You want it to
It's
pop.
an interesting
You
way
want,
to
you want
put
it to you want it to pop a little bit, because when you're looking at, especially the smaller stores, right, the ones that are only 25 feet wide or something,
Right.
it's hard to pick them out when you're
Right.
driving. Even if they have a sign that's different, when you're driving, you're not going to see it at all. When you're walking, even you can't tell when one store stops
Right.
and another one begins. So
You're right.
you have to kind of give them a little latitude in terms of what they can accent, at least, if not if you're not going to mess with the base colors. So these are desert palette colors, essentially. And, you'll find these in cities throughout the Southwest, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, El Paso. These are very, very typical. Anything from dark grays, even lighter grays, to some that are almost a pinkish hue. You see this kind of a mustard yellow, fairly often. And then the earth tone colors, which goes from everything what the earth looks like, browns to, color of vegetations, to the color of the sky and clouds, earth colors. And like I said, this is kind of what we've been using as guidance now. And if it's, within a shade of that, and it's not extremely fluorescent bright like my shirt.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Right, that's exactly. So, it's, a green is different when it's flat and not, fluorescent, as opposed to when it's earth tone and looks more like, grass or
Right.
alfalfa or something like that, which is the color you see throughout the valley. So,
If it's helpful to the council, I thought it would also maybe be of interest to you and the public that we have had an opportunity to talk with a number of property owners in the downtown area. And I know that a recent change in paint on one of our commercial properties prompted a great deal of discussion. We have obtained the cooperation of 4 commercial property owners to do a refresh on their paint. Those include Mr. Gutierrez that recently repainted his property asparagus was the color. Dinesh Vithalani, the pharmacy that is on the south side of Main Street between 6th and 8th. Andy Crutch has agreed to refresh his property, as well as Roberta Gibson. And so we've got some, I think, important movement along Main Street relative to the color palette, but are certainly open to hearing the council's feedback if you want to see a change to the ordinance, a change in direction in the palettes, or if you're comfortable with us utilizing the palette and continuing to advise. The discussions with the commercial property owners, what I tried to do was lay down some groundwork. If the city were able to provide some professional advice on the palette with base color and trim, would you be open to hearing our suggestions? And the positive response was absolutely. Let us know when you're ready to proceed. The goal is spring, to have everything spring, summer. The city will be working with the 4 commercial property owners to do lane closures as appropriate, and we'll do everything we can to facilitate the beautification of Main Street, which is absolutely consistent with the Brawley Beautiful initiative that we launched a little bit earlier this month.
I would suggest something as well, in that, we do have the Brawley Beautiful initiative in place, and that's going to take place during this month and next month, and in that relationship.
But I can't take any requests right now.
They can't take requests? But I'm sure that Imperial Stores, who we've partnered with in this effort, and is offering discounted paint for our community, if they have somebody, I'm sure that they have somebody, not just the paint department, but the actual vendor that they use. I'm sure that they have somebody that can maybe educate us on how colors are used and best applied. I don't know if that's something that we can maybe reach out to and see if we can. I'm sure they would be able to provide that at no cost. So that would be a suggestion as well. What I would like to see is further clarification for the public, because what ended up triggering a lot of comments was the building down Main Street, and I don't want to vilify anybody, certainly, so I'll be careful on how I say this. But there was comments on the color choice that was selected, and that business owner, they actually did come to the city of Brawley, and we provided guidance, and it was a color that was within our color palette, so it was approved essentially. And so, unfortunately, I believe they received harsh criticism, and I know we're trying to work with them as well to see if maybe there's something different that we can do. But further guidance on the base colors and the accent colors, I think, is very important, because if it's something that's going to stand out dramatically and doesn't necessarily flow with the downtown features and the buildings out there, that may stand out in a way which is not welcome in the area. Yeah. So.
And I think Rosanna had said that Ms. Irely was going to be around to kind of help with the paint, or she was or she wasn't. Are we getting her or not?
I have solicited a quote and a
Okay.
scope of service, and I'm waiting to hear back. I thought she might join us here today, and I don't see her in the audience.
Okay. And I think maybe we could work with the merchants also. I'm sure they're willing to help out with that also. And like the mayor said, Imperial Hardware is also going to help on the cost. So I think that'll be good. That'll help us, in different ways. I know her fee is a different one, but at least we can work around that. And it's really good to hear that our merchants and our business people are willing to make a change for the better.
The
So-
cooperation and collaboration was immediate with contact.
Good.
So that was just a wonderful welcome to the contact.
I think
Well,
when
thank you
when you
for
reach
doing
out
that
to
for us.
people and you say, let's work together, let's sit down and dialogue and talk about things, people are usually willing to work with you. It's one thing when you go in and say, you're going to do this, and then that kind of strikes, people wrong sometimes. So I appreciate the fact that staff have been proactive in meeting with some of the downtown merchants to get this thing worked out. So, because the color is bright.
Yeah, it's, I guess it could be worse, but it is out of place at this time.
Sure, at the time.
But like I said, if there's other similar, or not similar, but palette colors that come into place, altogether, if you look at it as a whole, it might look a little different. Now it stands out
Absolutely.
because everything is brown,
Right.
and beige.
And you look at other communities, maybe, for example, Julian or Ramona, where you have different colors. And
Well, even,
they-
well, anything from, I've seen little towns do it.
Right.
Every building's a different, actually, their ordinance even says you have to paint it different,
They
than
blend.
so it doesn't, look like
Right.
it's all one.
They blend in.
Yeah, or they've even done that, I've seen that done in housing, developments in some cities where you can't paint your house the same color as your neighbors, the
Right.
developer, when they build the new ones, they have to have a different color roof, a different color brick or stucco. But I think the key is, like what Ms. Moore was saying, is we need to, we're not color experts either in
Right.
terms of matching, but, in this case, maybe go a little step further and say, well, that's an okay color, but maybe you should use that as your trim. Maybe you should go with something
Right.
more, like a gray or something that can match on your base with that. And so it doesn't pop too much,
Right.
at least at this time.
Mr. Gates, I just have one question. So obviously asparagus or whatever, and it stood out, but it still comes from our palate. What can we do as a council or as a city do? I'm afraid that, can you be too restrictive on colors? I can see that, I'm hearing that. And at the same time, how do we mitigate that? Is it just communication? Because I know this business worked in earnest and came through the process and went on to do what they did. And just looking ahead, how do we as a city, how do we kind of manage that so that every color that's chosen as it comes together, it makes sense, it flows, it matches, whatever the case may be. Not exact, I don't mean match like every building's the same color, but there's continuity to it. So how is that managed? Through ordinance or through process?
I think probably better through process, because you do want to sit down one-on-one. The only time we really ever had problems of some that weren't in the palette, they were people who painted them without consulting us first. Like for a while when the building right over here was pink, really bright pink, but once we got with them, they changed it. I think if we have a chance to, I think the big thing is education on that. They need to be aware that there are some parameters, and if we let them know and they come to us, we know now that it's an important issue to the council, that we can take maybe a little more time on matching colors of, like you said, not just on the building itself in terms of base and trim, but also with adjacent ones, so it doesn't look too out of place.
Right.
That it flows in a palette scheme, down the road, basically.
So my suggestion is maybe we can talk to Ms. Irely and ask her, to look at these colors and kind of figure out, what is the colors that we should have on there and which ones should we maybe take care of?
I guess I need some clarification, and I guess I probably want to make a couple of statements. I think if you're going to use that type of color palette, you're going to have to tell them exactly what colors they're going to paint it, or you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
And so I can tell you that right now. The other thing is, what are we going to do when someone comes in and says, we're not going to paint it? I'm not going to paint it that color, I'm going to paint it the color I want to paint it. What are we going to do then? We have an ordinance that says we're going to arrest them. Are we going to
We're going to
prosecute
cite them for a misdemeanor.
Are we going to
is
cite
what
them for a
ordinance
misdemeanor?
citation
Are we
allows.
honestly going to cite them for a misdemeanor, or are we going to just say, okay, do what you want? Because my concern when you start to get very, very restrictive is, then you've got to enforce that. And I want to know how far we're going to go as a city to enforce these kinds of rules, because this is a private sector business. It's a private-owned business. It's not a government office or anything of that nature. So I just want to know how far we're going to go, and are we going to really actually tell them, you got to paint it these colors, or we're not going to let you paint your building. I just have some concerns about that. And I guess it stems from the private ownership of a building and the right to do maybe what you want to do with that building. One of the concerns that I have is we see a lot of palette colors, and like when you look at a palette like this, we better take all the greens and all the yellows out, because if we don't do that, then what you're going to find is when the time comes, you better take the pink out, you got to take the orange out, and you got to take that out. So then what do we do ultimately when we start doing that? Then we have different opinions over who likes this and who likes that, because when you get into this kind of discussion as a governmental entity, to me, you start to enter the picture of you can't drink sodas anymore, you can't do this, you can't do that, and how far do we want to go with that? I know I'm being a little bit more maybe facetious about it, but I've got to be honest with you. I just don't know how we enforce this on an ongoing basis if someone refuses to go along with the paint color schemes. I think we can suggest it.
And I agree with some of the points you're making, Councilmember Couchman, but I think we have seen that there's a tremendous amount of cooperation from downtown merchants, and,
Yes.
and even some of the, I think the comment that was shared or expressed from the green building owner was that, how many times, I remember, and here's a story of when I was a kid, I remember my dad picked out like the worst baby blue ever, and he told me, all right, you're going to paint the house. And so my brother and I started painting it, and he gets home later, and it was painting the trim. He's like, what the hell did you do? It's like, well, that's the paint that you left for us. He's like, I don't like it.
Yeah.
He goes, it was better in the store, but it's not, once you apply it. So, and that happens, that happens. Sometimes you think about it, you apply it, it's just different than what you envisioned. So, certainly, I think there is a great level of cooperation amongst the business members in downtown and throughout the city. So we can offer some guidance as to what a base color could be or an accent color could be. I think that would be best.
I realize offering the guidance is fine, and I realize we have a lot of cooperation, but I can envision down the line where we don't have that type of cooperation, and then what do we do under those circumstances? So I want us to be very cognizant of that as we pull colors out, but I do think we need to be pretty straightforward with people about the colors, because the gentleman came in, the color, we told him it was okay, he paints the building that color, then we go back to him and say, oh, wow, we got these complaints, and so let's change the color of your building. I'm concerned about that. If we're going to have to be very, very consistent with what we tell people, or else we've got a problem.
Again, I think the fact that is the only green building on the street is the reason why it's a concern. It's not the fact that it's a problem. And I think by us reaching out and talking with folks and say, hey, look, we are trying to beautify downtown. Work with us, help us. We don't want to go in there and tell you exactly what color to use. You want to give people a choice. So you sit down and work with people, and I think they're reasonable. They understand.
If it is any consolation, in my communication with him in the capacity of city manager, I never got to the point of there's a problem with your paint color. He stated, I assume you are contacting me regarding the color that is up on my building. And the good news is, I don't like the way it turned out either.
Okay.
So it was not we take with great sensitivity the topic of approaching a commercial property.
But we wouldn't have brought this up if it wasn't a problem, right? If somebody didn't complain, and if we didn't get complaints on it, then we wouldn't have said anything, and it would have just went along the way it was, right? So I think we need to adjust to that and be aware of that. I don't think it's a major issue, but I do think it's something that we need to all be aware of. And I think maybe we need to be a little bit, like I go down through there and I see a lot of buildings that need paint, okay, versus some buildings that are painted maybe a color that I don't particularly care for. So I think we need to be cognizant of that and maybe be a little more forgiving about certain things.
Sure.
And maybe we need to be real specific about the colors we would like to see. and then go from there, because when you do a palette, it covers a pretty broad range, and I think if we're going to start telling people what we would prefer, then I think that we need to look at limiting that somewhat to what we might, what we do prefer. But remember, everybody has a different preference.
Sure, there's different preference, and
Beauty is in the eye of the
even with
beholder.
Inferno as an example, when it was, the base color was up, before signage was introduced, it looked different. And so,
It does.
paint is just one element of a building, it's not everything. So, there's signage, there's the way they decorate, the way they present it, there's a lot of factors that are applied, so it's not
Right.
just the color of
And you
paint.
may have the green color, and it may look very good or the trim of some
Right.
type on a building, but it may not be the good base color.
Sure.
And so we all run through those kinds of things, and I think we just need to be aware of that. I just worry about government telling people what to do all the time, because I don't really want to be told what to do all the time.
And I agree with you in that, but I do think it's not uncommon at all, it's not uncommon for communities to designate color palettes, whether that be in downtown or in their commercial districts. So you see it in Palm Desert and other areas where it's very, or they change the way a McDonald's looks because it needs to conform to
Correct.
the area. So that's not unusual, but is there any other comments from council?
Are we, I guess, I'm sorry, are we setting a color palette for the entire city? Because like are we setting this for the Walmart corridor, the West Main corridor? Are we setting color
What's-
palettes for the entire city?
Downtown
It
specifically.
certainly is direction that we're willing to take from the council, but for the area that's referred to as the Gateway Specific Plan area, there are defined parameters and CCNRs relative to that property that are far more restrictive than anything that the
Right.
city.
I just want to make sure that we know what we're doing
implements. Right.
before we get into this completely. I don't have any problem with what we're doing necessarily. I just want to make sure we understand what we're doing. And are we setting a color palette for the entire city?
This
Are we
is only the
looking at just the
downtown
downtown?
specific
Or-
plan
Only the
area.
downtown area.
And this is just for discussion and potential action. We
have it.
if the action is just to have staff investigate this further, then that's what it is. We don't have to designate any particular color scheme at this time. Mr. Jason?
If you, kind of building on what Mr. Couchman was saying, the subjective nature of something like this may not be the best way to approach from the government side, like I said, what other places do, just like you do with the neighborhood, and other downtowns do, they have their own CC&Rs basically. They're like a homeowners organization or business owners organization. If they want to get together and vote on what they want to, do, and then it lies with the private sector to control that. And then, they can, basically neighbors telling you, hey, I don't like your, you can't
Right.
paint it like that because, we all voted on this and we don't want this.
Right.
Also, if you think about, if something's really ugly, in the long run, if it's really ugly to a majority of the people, business-wise, people aren't going to go there because it's ugly and it's not going to last.
Right.
And so it goes, it fixes itself in some fashion.
Sure.
But then again, if I wanted to open a beach and surf shop downtown, I might want to use turquoise and green, because that matches what kind of business I have. So like I said, like I said, from a government side, I think it is, like Mr. Couchman said, a little hard to enforce and to be objective
Right.
about on the choosing of colors, as opposed if an organization formed that would, take that responsibility, and everybody that is a private owner in that, a stake in that, has a say in it.
Thank you.
Right. And like you said, the business owner or the person that's occupying the facility came in, they came through the city, they painted the building, there was a discussion took place, staff has went out and talked to them and taken care of it, and it worked the way it should. So I
know this topic received several public comments via email and phone calls and social commentary. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to address this topic? Come on up.
Good evening, Rosemary Wood, Executive Director of NOCA. Okay, I actually like the color. And I didn't notice it until someone actually pointed it out to me and I drove by. I think that in order to attract more businesses I have seen more color bring more life into the downtown area. So I actually like the color. My only suggestion would be maybe a darker green trim. So it would pop out even better, and maybe others would follow through with, burgundy.
Sure.
Pink, or that one color, and then burgundy trim. So I think, personally, I like it. I actually have that color in my kitchen with a dark trim green.
See, Don does too.
Like a skirt. Just call it avocado.
I just think that it actually is start of something. It is an arts
You're right.
downtown arts district. I think color is beautiful, and I think it would actually bring life back to the downtown area, so.
I have to say, I've been in your kitchen, I didn't even notice that.
It's green. Lime green, not asparagus, but it is lime green, several, so.
Thank you for
I
your
just had to.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to comment on this item?
Don't see anybody.
No other comments? Is there any direction that the council would like to provide city staff?
Other than what they're doing, I think it's a good deal.
Right, and we mentioned some about potential professional advice,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Professional advice, and I certainly would reach out to, Imperial Store, since we do have that relationship currently. And for those of you who may not be aware, we have an arrangement with Imperial Stores where they're offering the lowest prices on paint, and that's going to help hopefully beautify our community. And several merchants are taking advantage of that opportunity. But you can purchase it this month and next month at deep discounts, and that was just something that we initiated to get people to help beautify their community. So if we can reach out to them as well, and they have a professional person that can come down, I'm sure whatever brand of paint they use, they have somebody that can help with those mechanisms. So,
Good idea.
is there any other comments from council?
Nope.
So that would be the direction from council to continue to work on the item and bring it back at a further date.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is discussion potential action to adopt first reading of ordinance number 2015, ordinance of the City Council of the City of Brawley, California, amending sidewalk sales, and adopt resolution number 2015, resolution of the City Council of the City of Brawley, California, establishing parameters in the downtown specific plan area regarding sidewalk sales. Mr. Gast.
Mr. Mayor Nava, council members, as you remember, we previously discussed, you gave staff direction to essentially go with the basic conditions of what we had on allowing the sidewalk sales within the 5 feet and whatnot, but only limit it on a trial basis on Fridays and Saturdays for 1 year. Staff came up with the recommendation, it's probably best that, since there's a potential for, changes in the future, that what we do is we change the ordinance to allowing it by right with the parameters and guidelines of the city council that is established by resolution, so we don't have to change the ordinance every time we decide we need to change, number of times a year.
10 foot.
Yeah, because it may change, like I said, this is a trial basis only, and we'll see how it works. And after a year, we can review it. I mean, if it becomes a problem, we can always review it before a year, if we see some really big issues of things getting out of hand. But, after 1 year, for sure, it would come back to you, and then at that time, you can recommend a change for different times, different windows, less times, or we can, remove it completely, but based on a resolution rather than having to change the whole ordinance.
And this item has also been a hot button item with the business community, so it's been addressed multiple times at the Business Advisory Committee level, and it's been certainly discussed with me, and I'm sure with other members of the City Council by various, whether that's group or individuals. So, Mayor Pro Tem Wharton, would you just give us a background, since you did participate in the Business Advisory Committee meetings and what they concluded?
Absolutely, and I will share with you, it was really, the advisory committee was really deadlocked. And I shouldn't even say deadlocked, that almost implies there was opposition. Really didn't know how to move forward with a recommendation other than what was proposed from the Planning Commission. Some of the language that came through there. The number one issue, obviously, is just the aesthetics, how it looks, how it presents. And I believe what's being proposed with this ordinance is a couple things. That it's life-limited. It's not just an open-ended ordinance. It's a trial period. The other one is that the chamber, in collaboration with the downtown merchants, shall recommend standards of display items in a manner that advances the objective of the downtown specific area plan and the Brawley Downtown Arts District. So as far as the look, the feel, the presentation of it is a huge item, and I think there's at least the beginning of some language in there. And I think the advisory committee was comfortable enough with that, but I will also say that we have stakeholders that are also here with us today, that were here with us that day, that were also vocal about their fear of it not looking right and well. So that was well voiced. I think it was worth mentioning that through the advisory committee, that our city manager, I believe, visited close to 17 merchants or 17 businesses, both downtown and around, and really took what I would consider a one-to-one kind of a survey. And again, the findings from that was fairly split, so if I'm not mistaken. So with that being said, I think this was through council, kind of our recommendation, coming up with a way that we can move forward and see how it goes.
I think one of the comments that was not one, but it was certainly brought to my attention on multiple occasions, is that even if we did have these recommended guidelines, the enforcement aspect was in question. So how would we enforce that? Could you provide some insight to
Right,
that?
that is a good question, because this is most likely, a lot of this will be occurring after hours or on a Saturday. So that in terms of enforcement, it will be hard for 9 to 5 staff, basically to take care of that.
So basically, we would be relying upon fire personnel or police personnel to implement outside of normal business hours. If there is sidewalk that is encroached upon beyond the defined parameters, that's the way we would enforce outside of normal business hours.
Councilmember Castro, you need to comment?
Yes. I think that the recommendation that we're talking about today on the Fridays and Saturdays also came from the chamber, because I am the city member of the chamber board, and they had an intensive discussion about this, and also had the findings from the business committee. And they also, and I believe they made the recommendation for the Fridays and Saturdays as a limited number. I will state that I've been somewhat opposed to sidewalk sales. However, I'm not one to resist change if we feel that change is necessary. I do believe that we've had sidewalk sales in the past. I do believe that when I was a child here, there were sidewalk sales then at different times. Now, probably not every day and not every business, but I do know that they do occur, and I've seen them in other areas also. I've also seen where they restrict them in other areas and they do not have them. And so I think it's a mixed bag. I think if we do it on a trial basis, I think at least we're not setting it up to do it forever. If there are problems with it, we can take appropriate steps or allow enforcement to take place. If there's a lot of issues with it, then I think we end the practice and we move on. But I do think, I don't want to be opposed to change and telling businesses what to do. I mean, I think they need to prosper in the way they need to prosper. I do know there's opposition. I do know that there's probably people that are in favor of it. So I do know that we have both sides of the issue.
My question is, we talked about Friday and Saturday, correct? That's when okay, so wouldn't it start in the morning where our staff would be able to watch it, kind of go out there and cruise around and see what's, how people are how it's being attracted, how they're setting up, how the stuff looks, their merchandise and stuff that they're putting out. So I think that even for that Friday, it's a whole day, we would be able to come up with something.
And that might flow over to Saturday. I mean, it's possible that type of enforcement would flow over into Saturday, and we would not have a problem yet on Saturday.
Just to begin with, just because
I think there's a rollout that we need to to plan accordingly for, which would be to advise everyone that has the opportunity available that sidewalk sales are now an option in the downtown corridor, and we can work with them to establish the exact distance from their building, maybe utilize spray paint or some form of marking to the sidewalk that shows for a starting point, this
Where the
is
limits are.
right where.
You know, and you all know my background here, it's small business, but I'm very supportive of small business. The one thing that does concern me, though, is it may go unregulated. And, you know, when you do have staff, even if it's during their work hours, that's not their primary focus. So it may go unnoticed, and then, you know, it leads to overcrowding issues, and maybe one merchant is doing a lot more than the other, so it creates some problems. I would still like to discuss this further. And I would propose this for your consideration, that if we table this item for at least another month or 2 months and see if we can further define how it's going to be managed with respect to the enforcement aspect of it, because I think it addresses it, but, you know, when we're relying on our firefighters or people after the fact or after hours, I don't think that's maybe a productive way of utilizing their time, so.
The only problem I see with that, Mayor, is that you're extending it to our summer months, you know, and it's going to be very hot out there, and you're not going to get too many people looking at it. So if you extend it that long, I think it's, for me, I think we need to get it done as soon as possible, because, I mean, even now, it's warm. Can you imagine how it is later on,
but
2 months
again,
from now?
Good point. And it's not so much, the concern isn't the hot weather, it's more of the fact that people will display, and it's just not a regulated basis, and that's the biggest concern that's been expressed.
So as it stands, you'd have a first reading and a second reading, and then the effective date is 30 days after the second reading, just as a reminder.
So now it would be May 7th when it would actually begin to. You know, in terms of the enforcement, I'm sure some of it will be passive also. You'll hear complaints from citizens or the other adjacent businesses saying, hey, they had it way out more than 5 feet. You get a couple pictures given to us, we could take care of the enforcement during the week too. Like you said, I know it's going to be hard to actively do it all the time, and, you know, like say even the police and fire are probably not going to have time to maybe sometime right away jump on it, you know, unless they just happen to be next door or something like that, to let them know, hey, this is out of hand here. But, you know, if they can document it somehow, we can follow, the regular weekly staff can, you know, help follow up on those issues and go have a talk with the owner and say, hey, you know, these are the parameters that we've already mailed to you, and this is the rules you need to follow.
Mr. Zara, if you could provide some input with respect to what the chamber's position was, and you represent the various businesses in the downtown area. Is there any input you'd like to provide?
And I understand and agree that enforcement is always the big sticking point on this kind of thing. But to me, it falls under a very similar category to a lot of the residential, the water use issues. It's not being actively enforced, it relies on complaints. And just like the discussions with the downtown merchants regarding the paint colors, I think there would be some success with having a little bit of peer pressure, if you will. Having, certainly the chamber's willing to go walk the downtown and see the sidewalk sales firsthand and make some suggestions for cleaning it up, tightening it up. If I need to walk out there on every Friday afternoon with a tape measure to make sure that there's ADA clearance, I'm happy to do that, just to see that the options are available. And then I think most importantly, like Mr. Couchman said, if it's not working, then so be it, you pull it. But I think it would be certainly think it would be worth giving them the opportunity to demonstrate that they would utilize the sidewalk sales in a responsible manner.
Thank you, Mr. Zara.
We've talked about it, we looked at some of the options, and we've already stated this is a temporary setup, so I think we need to move forward with it and do our best to make it work, and if it don't work, and then we go back and say, hey, guys, we're sorry, we pull the plug.
Absolutely.
Is there any other comments from the public? I know that there's some not in favor. Please come up. While he's coming up, Mr. Zara, and if it does move forward tonight, I would appreciate your assistance with not just enforcement, but keeping us abreast of what is the feeling
Chris Ferguson, 1680 A Street. Sorry, it's been a long day for me. I apologize in advance. Enforcement, again, is going to be a problem. You're going to be relying on businesses, I hate to use this word, narking on each other. They're going to be tattling. It's like, oh, he was, a foot too far out, but and, we all know that the business community can be kind of childish at times, but I didn't say that. The other thing is, I've only heard one mention. I know this has been brought up because I brought it up at the last time we discussed this, pedestrian traffic. It's only been brought one time as a joke. Jason's mentioning, I'll bring a tape measure out to see if we meet ADA clearance. I don't want to see Brawley turn into Calexico. Because in Calexico, a business will have their stuff, takes over the entire sidewalk. If you're walking past it, you have to walk into the street, past the parked cars in order to get around it. And then when the cops do, and I think sometimes the cops will walk by and enforce it, they'll gladly move it back inside. As soon as that cop turns that corner, all that stuff is right out in the street before you can blink. I really would like to see some sort of understanding from the business side of this, that when they do get their permits, or however this is going to be enforced, on that level, that they understand, you need to keep the traffic clear, and if you don't keep the traffic clear, and we catch that you are encroaching on that part of the sidewalk, that we may at any time revoke your license. I would like to see that. I would also like to see an exception made for cattle call, that if you're going to allow sidewalk sales during cattle call, that too would be a separate license, as we were discussing with the vendors thing earlier. I mean, those are my chief concerns as far as sidewalk sales go. Let them have them. I would love to see some businesses out here with hot dog carts. Because walking down the street you get hungry and you don't want to sit down, and anyway, that's a side. Anyway, I do hope that pedestrian traffic is very important, because you do want that foot traffic, not just for the sidewalk sales, but for the other businesses too.
Right.
Plus, you need to get through the area.
Sure.
Without any problems. Anyway, that was my concern, and I do hope that if this is addressed in the second reading, that these sorts of things are enforced. Enforcement is going to be the problem, and it's going to be the necessity to get this done.
Thank you for your comments. One item that I would bring up is, and thank you for your comments, Mr. Ferguson, that triggered a thought in my mind. If we do obviously move forward with this tonight, and it passes and it's effective in May, if we could provide guidance, and not just the technical aspects of it, but maybe something visual so people can see, this is what it looks like, and maybe a sample, and provide that to downtown merchants so they understand very well what would be allowed and what's not allowed. And so maybe an example of what would be allowed, of what wouldn't be allowed. And so I think that could help further the understanding. So is there any further comments from council, from the public on this item?
Mr. Mayor, before we maybe make a motion, I do want to make it clear to the public, you can currently go through the CUP process and do a sidewalk sale, as long as you make it through the CUP process. So it's not that right now that it's restricted. You can have a sidewalk sale as long as you comply with all the specific points that are required of the conditional use permit. It's expensive, it's arduous, and that's probably the deterrent. So what we're attempting to do here is not by CUP, but to change it by by ordinance. So I just want to make that clear.
Is there a motion to approve? I'm sorry, go ahead. Of course.
Lupi Navarro, 671 South 18th, and I also own downtown property. I believe the city is opening up a can of worms that they won't be able to control. This is not a job for the police or the fire department to be enforcing the ordinance or whatever. You had one volunteer from the chamber, and he might start doing it, but I don't think he's going to do it constantly. I am also on that advisory committee to the council, and when we talked about it, We didn't agree on anything because we have 5 members and all 5 had a different opinion. So nobody seconded each other's because of the 5 different ideas that we had, which in a way it was good. But not having a second and a majority, nothing passed with us. So it was sent to the council. I've lived in Brawley since I was 6 years old, and even when downtown was thriving back in my days or way back then, I never saw sidewalk sales, and everybody had a good business. I feel that I would have voted no for the sidewalk sales. I think it's a can of worms that it might explode, and I don't think the city has that staff to be enforcing it. I see nobody from the downtown area here wanting a yes vote, or they haven't spoken up. So saying that, I just want to say that again, that it's opening up a can of worms.
Thank you for your comment. And the item, just so for clarification, I know there's members of the public that weren't here in the discussion, but this has been ongoing for quite some time, and it was actually brought to our attention by a member of the business community who was opposed to a neighbor that had merchandise for sale, and he felt that it was distracting for his business, and so that sort of triggered the conversation, and it's been a long one. My own feeling is I'm very supportive of business. I don't feel like sidewalk sales are going to, if you're in the business just to have sidewalk sales, you shouldn't be in business. I mean, that's just my own opinion, and it's not reflective of everybody here. But, I could see that we're changing our environment. You know that we've designated the downtown area an arts district, so I would like to see if, for example, there are art studios, and we have one in our downtown area now, but if others open up and they're able to sell, for example, paintings and things like that during some of the events that the chamber is hosting, I think that sort of mindset, I know we're thinking maybe thrift stores, or we're thinking people selling old merchandise on racks, but that may not be the case. And so, I have a lot of concerns with respect to enforcing it, and I share the same concerns as Mr. Navarro. But it is a limited time. I know it's been vetted and discussed by multiple groups, and for the sake of trial, I believe we could give it an opportunity to try and succeed. But certainly, following what I described earlier, which was an example of what can be done, what can't be done, so people are very clear on how this can be applied. I think that may be the better approach. But are there any further comments from the public? I know it's been a long night on this topic, but is there any other comments from council? Anyone else?
I just don't think that the stores that we have right now is sufficient enough to have a good sidewalk sale.
Another comment. Is there a motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance number 2015?
I make the motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion? I'll repeat that. There is a motion to approve the first reading. Is there a second to the motion? Okay, seeing none.
I would like to make a motion that we do come back with council with more content on enforcement, and along with that, a graphic depiction that can show both the public as well as council what the display should look like with the ordinance.
So there was a motion initially that failed for lack of a second. There's a second motion. Is there a, excuse me, there was a separate motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second.
Mayor Nava, before you take the vote, may I ask for a clarifying point?
Mayor Pro Tem Warren, would you clarify that, please?
By the maker of the motion, the graphic representation is for an education piece that would be handed out to downtown merchants, or something different?
That would be nice, but no, the intent of that depiction was for the purpose of this discussion. So it partly acknowledging Mr. Ferguson's comments about compliance as well as conformity with some, aesthetic look.
So the
I wanna see what it
display
looks like.
component,
Yes,
the
yes.
notion that the chamber,
And the 5 feet out and the ADA, so if we can see a sample, as the mayor asked earlier.
Okay.
Just one second. Sure. And another clarification on your motion, with respect to the enforcement aspect of it, what, is there anything in particular that you wanted to?
It was suggested that we'd be using public safety resources for that, so maybe go back to the drawing board. What's more realistic? What can we do? If not, we find out that may be a sticking point for us to move forward.
Sure.
So,
So that's clarification on your motion. Councilmember Couchman, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. My whole thing was, I think it's for both purposes. The depiction or
Right.
whatever we're going to do is for us to look at, but it's also, I think, an educational tool that'll be good for employers or for the people, the business merchants that are on the downtown area, so they can look at that and it will give them some guidelines as to what they do. As far as enforcement goes, what we may need to look at is we may need to hire some type of part-time person that goes down through there, like some type of enforcement person that's specific for that, or somebody that we get that's a volunteer that agrees to do that, such as we've had with the graffiti painting and other types of things like that, where we have someone that's in place that's going to at least initially do some enforcement on this action. Because I agree, we do not have a code enforcement person right now. If we had a code enforcement person, I think this might be an easier deal to put into place and also have enforcement occur. So I think we need to discuss that a little bit and maybe look at that a little bit more and flesh that out. And then I think with that, I think that's really what I think we're all looking at here.
So there's a motion, there's a second to that motion. Any further discussion by council? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Yes.
That's a nay? That's a nay?
That's a nay.
I see why Imperial's the fastest growing city in the country.
So 4
I don't
yes
think sidewalk sales
and
makes
1 is a no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion staff direction regarding the Corky McMillan Company's Latigo Ranch subdivision alternatives proposal.
And Mayor Nava, today we have a presentation by our planning director, and I'll ask that our city engineer come forward as well. This is an item on tonight's agenda that's a staff direction item. I know council is well acquainted with the Latigo Ranch subdivision, which is on immediately to the east of the Walmart shopping center. There's been a great deal of dialogue between McMillan and staff over the course of the last 12 months or so, with one of the major items being the cost associated with construction of Wildcat. So what I'd like to do is just very briefly have staff refresh what the conditions currently are. This is not a condition modification hearing. This is a staff direction item where we're trying to understand, based on the topics that have come forward with the council and the significance of Wildcat, how you would like to see us proceed as a city reviewing the improvements associated with the subdivision. And with that, I will hand off to our planning director.
Good evening once again. This location is Latigo Ranch. This is the subdivision that is behind the Walmart, south of Malin Park and Victoria Park, and just to the west of Dogwood. In the initial, this whole area here, what you see is the tentative map, which includes primary single-family homes here in the middle. Over here, there was a possible school site, but they have chosen another location now. What you see, though, there's an underlying option of continued single-family, which is what that will eventually be now. Over here is the park retention area, which is dug but not functioning as a park at this time. This was recorded, or is planned to be recorded. The first unit is recorded. The second unit hasn't been, in 2 units, the first one being basically the northern half of it, essentially, which is 115 units, I believe, or 117 units. Altogether, there's, I believe, 267 units. So it's a little less than that, but I think that didn't, at that time, wasn't in the account for the school site, but the 267 includes that area. So the condition stated that by the end of Unit 1, so by the end of those 117, that the improvements of the southern part of Wildcat would be completed from Western Avenue, which is where it ends now, right on the other side where the Walmart property is, and it's blocked off, over here to South Imperial Avenue, and it says Dogwood, but it's South Imperial Avenue now that it's in the city. And the improvements include doing half the street, undergrounding the canal, and developing a green belt, essentially with a sidewalk and a zero-scaped area. They are proposing a different approach of phasing. They're looking to basically do Wildcat on a slower schedule, and here you'll see the phases. These are the proposed phases here. Phase 1 will take it to South 1st Street. The second one will take it to 3rd Street, South 3rd Street, and the last phase would take it to South Imperial Avenue. The thing is also that this existing opening, the only opening right now into the subdivision, is Monterey Avenue right here. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's the way you get in. It's actually, it's only a temporary. It's not, eventually that will become part of this open space area and will be removed once this is completed as designed. So, I guess what they're proposing to do is do phase 1 with the improvements for Unit 1, and then continue with Unit 2, and when they record Unit 2, we'll continue with the Phase 2 and Phase 3 at increments of those, of that particular unit being Unit 2.
Gordon, if I may just recap a couple items. So included in the agenda package on page 93 are the staff report as well as a letter of request dated March 2nd, 2015. And we do have this evening in the room representatives from the Corky McMillan Companies. Want to restate for the record that there's a number of requests that are being made. The first is a request to release our current subdivision bond and instead substitute a lien contract to guarantee the completion of off-site improvements. And then, as described by Gordon a few moments ago, alter the timing associated with the improvement of Wildcat Drive. I do want to add, for the council's benefit and that of the public, that we have been in dialogue with McMillan Companies in an attempt to see what the city can do to achieve this east-west access, because not only is tapping the commercial opportunities that are at the Walmart shopping center important to the city, but also providing a legal access east to west, as council has discussed as recently as a strategic planning meeting, all the way to Highway 111 as we know it on our eastern boundary, our best road. So in light of the continuous comments that have been shared by council, we've tried to explore some possibilities for the city to offset the expense associated with the east-west access, and that really is the fundamental issue confronting the project, is the cost of undergrounding IID facilities as well as constructing the improvements. So essentially, the request that we've received is that there's a desire to accomplish only a portion of the improvements with Unit 1, which is the final mapped area, and place the responsibility for the total improvements on Unit 2, which we don't know if it will ever be completed at this point because it's a tentative without a final map. And then in lieu of conventional bonding, there's a request for the use of a property lien. And I do want to state for the record and for the benefit of our developer here in the audience that the lien contract has been used by some neighboring jurisdictions, but we have a very specific history in the city of Brawley recent times where unfortunately we had to call our bonds and pursue legal remedies to get off-site improvements completed. So there is some concern on the part of staff with regard to the risk associated and the trade-off for timing that has been expressed as important by the council with regard to the east-west access. I'm sorry, Gordon, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, that was basically like the city manager mentioned, this is, there are some trade-offs, and, maybe can get a little more houses built right now, but there is no assurance that Unit 2 will ever be built. And the city had the lien on the property and they acquired it in that way. What do we do with it, right? Because there wouldn't be any improvements, past that, in that area, then it's just raw land.
Yeah.
Did we give, I'm sorry, did we give, by any chance, the families that live there, did we give them a letter stating that we were going to be talking about this, about, building more homes around there? And the reason I ask is most of them are young, with young children who, are less than 5 years old. There's quite a few of them in that area. And I know that they did come out at one point and state that they were a little concerned because they don't have fences in the front, where their kids can go out and stay inside the fence. So they said, they did ask, when are we going to have the meeting? I unfortunately only put it out on Facebook early this morning, so I'm not sure. I was hoping that we did send out a letter of some sort.
We didn't send out noticing because, well, it's a great suggestion and certainly one that if the council wants to delay providing direction, we can invite it, but invite participation at a future meeting date. Typically, the notification occurs when we have a public hearing and a formal modification process. At this point, I am seeking council direction so we know how much time to ask of our city attorney and others to review these approaches. If the approaches that are a part of this letter are not desirable, we'll hold on utilizing city resources and further investigating this alternative strategy. But happy to take direction on the topic if your desire is to have public outreach on the topic in advance of council providing direction.
For them, yes. I mean, because they do, they're very concerned about their children, the traffic that's going to be around there, how is that going to be taken care of? And I couldn't give them any answers. Unfortunately, I failed to put it out earlier and let them know.
And so when you refer to the residents, you mean those along First Street in the abutting subdivision, or you mean anybody in the existing?
In Appaloosa and Monterey.
So the ones that are existing in the subdivision.
Family that's already there.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I may, Mayor, in talking to staff and talking to some of the developers in this project, that was one of my main concerns. If we're going to reroute traffic, and then we definitely need to sit down and get everybody at the table and talk about it. But we also need to look at this project is where it is. What do we need to do as a city? What do the developers need to do for us to help move this along and take care of the neighborhood also? And I don't know if we're at that point, but I think we need to sit down and get everybody at the table and talk about it, because you're right, that's going to reroute traffic through that neighborhood to Dogwood.
I just want to reiterate the proposal. The developer aims to construct and sell the finished lots in Unit 1. So, Unit 1, and is proposing to, 1, limit Wildcat Drive improvements for Unit 1 to half-width improvements of Wildcat Drive to First Avenue. 2, install traffic calming devices on South First Street between Latigo Ranch and Malin Street. 3, replace the current subdivision bond that guarantees offsite improvements with a lien contract on the Unit 2 property. And 4, construct the on-site stormwater pump station and Phase 1 park improvements in the detention bases. Now, so there's 4 items, and that's their proposal to council. My concern is item number 3, and that's replacing the current subdivision bond that guarantees offsite improvements. They're proposing a lien on Unit 2. As our city planner has noted, there is no guarantee that Unit 2 would never develop, and so we would be stuck with if in fact it resulted in that, we would be in a position to where we have vacant land essentially, because it hasn't been, I don't think it's been mapped, has it?
There's a tentative map.
It's just a tentative map, and the thing, it expires in about another 2 or 3 years, and that's as far as it can be extended. It would have to be re-entitled after that. But like, really quick, I make a point back to Ms. Noriega's comment, the good point about the traffic on the street, that, I mean, I know the people there, they're aware that there are houses that planned around it, but what they weren't probably aware of, and it makes staff apprehensive also, is that the traffic, instead of flowing through on an arterial like it is planned to Wildcat Drive, is that it would, for a time being, come through Monterey Avenue. So traffic calming, you know, a lot of people can start using that as a shortcut from the east side of town to get to Walmart. So, you know, the right kind of traffic calming needs to really be studied, because, you know, speed bumps I don't think work very well. If anything, I've seen in other places you put bulb outs at the intersections. Obviously, you basically have to have a stop sign at every street. You know, so that's really the mitigation you'd be looking at if this type of phasing would be moving forward.
And with respect to the other items, is there anyone on council with concerns regarding items 1 to 4?
I have concerns, some concerns. One, as you talked about, the bond release and property lien. Our history is anything, and I'm really cognizant of history being on this council, and some of you have been here longer than I have, is that the bonding doesn't even work. I'm not sure if the property lien works either. The bonding, generally speaking, what happens with the bonding is we go and ask for the bond, and we have to fight for 2 or 3 years in court. We spend a tremendous amount of money in order to capture the bond amount, because it isn't, people think that you have $1 million bond, so they just give us $1 million. Not the way it works. We're lucky to get $400,000 out of $1 million bond, and we can't make all the improvements. So we have the bond issue with the property lien, and the property would be just open land. So I'm not sure that our money would be forthcoming, and I'm not sure that improvements would ever be possible based upon that scenario. And so that concerns me. I'm not sure about the bonds, but I'm certainly not sure about the property lien. The other thing is the roadway. My concern there is, do we become the Julia Drive of the east side of Wildcat Drive? And do we become, First Street becomes a problem because of the traffic, and then the Monterey becomes a problem because of the traffic. And then if we have, you know, a lot of traffic and a lot of cars going down these residential streets, well, then we're going to receive some complaints from the residents of those residential streets, when there really was an arterial design that would allow traffic to flow down the Wildcat Drive all the way through, and that makes a lot more sense. It gets them off the residential areas, et cetera. So that's a concern of mine. IID improvements are not a part of the bond. I think that's important to note. So those canal covering costs that are incurred there, they're not a part of the bond that the city has, and I'm not sure, I don't believe IID has a bond on any of those at this point in time. I could be wrong, but I don't think they're covered, and they're not bonded, I think, at this point in time. Is that correct? Okay, that's correct. Basically, what I believe is we get left with partial improvements, and then we've run through this with several different projects within the city, and not necessarily reflective of these gentlemen or this project or anything else that we have to do, but I just have some concerns that we get left with a partial project that doesn't have all the improvements that we need, and then we play Band-Aid kind of fixing these things and trying to get them to work in a way that we wouldn't have to do if we just had all the improvements up front as we normally require. The other thing I would just state, and the city manager can tell me, I think we had offered, and one of the emails, the communication that I got was, we had offered $600,000 to try to push this process through and try to get the whole, well, the half of the Wildcat improvement, whatever that entails. I think we did offer $600,000 in city funds that would not have to be repaid, and it would be a pure contribution for that project in order to further that, but I don't believe that was accepted.
Correct.
And so that's another consideration that we have to do. Do we need to add more money to that? Do we add less? I know that we did some benefit to Florentine when they came in, and so we're not adverse to doing some of that up to a point that's reasonable and fair, and however we do that. So those are my concerns, and I think that's what I have.
And the bond issue is likely a premium, that's being paid, and they want to avoid that. But is there any other mechanisms in place to help maybe consider what they're requiring or asking and protect us as well, like a reduced bond, or is there personal guarantees, things of that nature that can be applied?
I will look to our city attorney, who has provided us with some legal guidance, some appropriate for open session and some maybe a better fit for closed.
Sure.
There's all kinds of things you can talk about, but there's all kinds of ways to do it, but personal guarantees are really tough because, first of all, people are very reluctant to give them for good reason, and second, it all depends on the credit worthiness of the guarantor. So bonding much more secure, and even that's tough. Very tough.
One of the past experiences that we relied upon was the format for Florentine Estates, because we, at least in recent times, had gone through a evaluation of what's in the traffic impact fee account, what might be available for roadway improvements, how might we structure it in a manner that either assists with providing capital up front to get a project completed with some reimbursement scenario based on a per unit building permit pulled. We tried in this situation to simply offer a sweep on our traffic impact fee account, our accrued balance, which would be subject to council approval. It was simply an exploratory conversation, so I want to be sure that I clarify for your benefit and that of the developer. But even in the dollar amount of $600,000, it wasn't enough to provide an offset to the cost of the improvements associated with Wildcat.
I made a suggestion some time back that maybe the city of Brawley, the developers, the IID, everybody sit down at the table and see what it would take to do the project as initially submitted, to try to see if that will work. I mean, have we thought about that?
And that's
Cease dialogue with IID relative to Best Road.
Right.
I'm sorry, not Best, Wildcat Drive.
And it's something that we did discuss a long while back, and I don't believe that has been done yet, but it's worth having that conversation.
I believe Mr. DeBose had a meeting with IID. Did you not, Tom?
Not recently.
Oh, not recently, okay. I thought when we had a discussion, okay. I understood when we talked that he had, sorry.
There's representation from the developer here. Would you like to share anything with the public?
Mayor, members of the council, appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight. Mr. Mayor, before I get started, I'd like to share just a little bit with you. When you were talking about the color palette story and your reminiscence of being a child, I had to laugh. As my first son was born, I think I repainted that nursery 5 times. And it got measurably smaller each and every time. I think I lost a couple square feet because my wife could not settle on the color of blue, incidentally. So we both had trouble with the color blue. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I'm Guy Asara. I'm with the Corky McMillan Companies. My address is 2750 Womble Road in San Diego. As staff has shared with you, we mapped this property back in 2005, as the report indicates. Of course, at that time, the market was in a very different condition than it is today, and certainly much different than it was in 2007, 8, and 9, when we all went through what was the worst economic catastrophe probably in our lifetimes. No one here old enough to probably live through the Depression. It was at that time part of a much larger land holding. So when we agreed to these conditions, these improvements, specifically Wildcat, which was a very expensive improvement and could never have been substantiated by the 200 plus or minus lots that this project represents. But we also own the piece of property that's contiguous to this to the south. And so we were going to amortize those costs over a much larger area. Again, when the recession hit, we lost the option on that piece of property. Of course, the market went away on us. We have 18 homes occupied. 4 of those initially were the models. We sold an additional, what's that math, 14 homes. And then the project stopped because we lost financing. So post-recession, my job, or part of my job, is to clean up kind of issues like this. And we built in 5 divisions across the state of California and Texas, and there were a number of these kind of issues. What we have here, and what you're probably familiar with, is a busted financial project. The difference here is a couple things. First of all, if you've been out to the site, we've been excellent stewards to the land. I think each and every time I come out here, they're clean. We keep them clean. They're weed-free. The lights are repaired. They're in good operating condition. At no time have we let the property fall into a state of disrepair and would show ill will towards your city. And I think that just goes to the tone and tenor of our company. We try to be good corporate citizens in each community in which we operate, and I hope you can appreciate that. The second part is it's prime location to some of your better assets, and that's the entrance next to Walmart. And what I was told, I think initially in meeting with the city, is that linkage was on Wildcat through to the Walmart site was very important to the city. So while we tried to discuss and coordinate a solution that was acceptable to all parties, that in my mind became a key asset, is how do we make that connection? Because we now know people are driving up on the lots and around barriers and are taking very circuitous paths to try to make that connection. So we, in designing a solution, brought that first and foremost into our minds. The second part is we've got 96 lots out there that are ready to go, that are ready to build on. And although prices are much lower than they were certainly in 2005, 2006, which makes it difficult to finance major infrastructure, the benefit it has is it delivers affordable homes to a community. I mean, if we were able to build those 96 homes now, and I don't mean now, but over the period of the next couple of years, they would be certainly much more affordable than they would have been in 2005, 6, and 7. And that's a benefit to the community, I think. It brings 100 new homes that otherwise won't be here. It brings fees to the city, which generate an opportunity to provide infrastructure. So those were our guiding principles. The fact of the matter, and the councilman talked about it earlier, is we have a discrepancy, and the discrepancy is this. There's a $6.5 million bond, and it has nothing to do with premiums. Certainly, we don't like paying premiums. Who does? I don't like paying my house insurance, but, I do it. The premium here, relative to the issues we're talking about, are minor. They just don't even rise to the level of concern. What it is I've got a bonding company. It's got a $6.5 million bond hanging out there. We think it is disproportionate to the obligation, number one. They think it's disproportionate to the obligation. In other words, we think that the facilities that the bond substantiates are much less than 6.5. And the reason I say that is they have looked at the bonding obligation, as have we, and it is our opinion that the canal is not included in that. So when you take the canal out, the cost of that road is much less than $6 million. The issue comes because we can't build the road without undergrounding the canal. And I'm sure your attorney can advise you, but in subdivision law, if the improvement can't be made, the validity of the entire condition is in question. So if the canal today was underground, you could go to the bonding company, you could go to us and compel us to make the road improvement. And if in fact we didn't do that, you could then go and pursue the bond company, subject to all the experience you've had with bond companies. And how fun is that? The problem is the canal is in the way. And I know we've had a discrepancy of that opinion. It is their strong opinion that the canal is not included in their bond estimate. So if you went to them today, they would tell you, underground the canal and then come talk to me. So in us designing a solution, what we said is, we will make that improvement, that Phase 1 improvement, inclusive of the canal. We'll underground that portion. It's very expensive. We've got an estimate from IID, but we'll do that to get that connection made. In order to finance just that, I need those 96 lots. It will take all of the revenue from those 96 lots to make that improvement. That's how expensive it is. Unfortunately, our business is a capital-intensive business. It will take bank financing. And to take bank financing, I need to show a margin. I need to show some kind of profit. It is that profit I'm going to use to make that improvement. So it's not simply throwing cash at it, it's a financing mechanism. Certainly, I understand your concerns about a lien contract, but I think as the dialogue here has developed, what we've been talking about is you want the road, and I can appreciate you want the road. But the road simply will not get built unless we cooperatively find a solution to solve the financing issue and the costs associated with it. So it's not a matter of, let's send them the way and just make them build the road. The road simply won't get built unless we find a way to monetize those lots to do it. And then to attenuate, lengthen out the cash flow stream associated with the rest of the improvement. If I could, I would love to build that road for you. We made a commitment when we signed the subdivision, but conditions are different today, and you guys recognize that. Conditions are different than they were in 2005 when we signed it, and there's just nothing we can do about that. We've just got to decide we're going to move forward in a cooperative way that meets everyone's goals and objectives, or we're not. Unfortunately, I think that without some resolution to this issue, this project just sits. And it just sits, and it just sits, and it just sits. And you don't get that connection to Western, and there's just not a lot more we can bring to the table. So we're always open to dialogue. The city, Ms. Moore and her staff have been incredibly cooperative, and we've brainstormed a lot of solutions. And I'm not here to tell you these are the only solutions. We will look at more if we can think of more. We'll take your suggestions. I certainly agree that the community needs to be brought into it. The 4 homes that are located on Monterey, if you were to consider this, certainly need to be consulted and their fears allayed and addressed. So all of those things we can do, we're open to suggestions. I would like to continue to move this forward in the most expeditious manner. The property is there, it can be developed, it would be a net benefit to the city. I don't think it serves any of us well to let this issue languish, because just in and of itself, the obstacles that face us from bringing it to a successful close are not going to change unless we change them. So I'm available for questions. Tom is here as well, and he's been our consultant and engineer. If you have technical questions, we're available. But I appreciate your consideration. I appreciate staff's time and consideration, and thank you very much.
Mr. Cerro, thank you for your comments. I do have some questions for you. With respect to the bond, you say it's a $6.5 million bond, and you're of the opinion, and your bonding company is of the opinion that that value is too high, right? And so there's also some discussion that you've had with the city with respect to the undergrounding of the IID canal, whether or not that would be your responsibility or not. With respect to the bond, though, what is the opinion of your bonding company? What should it be?
Well, the bond was very specific. What the bond has attached to it is a list of improvements. And specifically, they were inclusive of the road and all of what we would call in-tract improvements. So if you look at those 96 plus 18, I guess 114 lots of what we call Unit 1, it was all the in-tract streets associated with that, the water facilities associated with that, the storm drain facilities, and so forth, the public improvements within that. And so typically what happens is as you make those improvements and the city accepts those improvements, they'll reduce your bond at a commensurate level as you've made those improvements. So when we went back and made the analysis and said we have done all the Unit 1 improvements, and what is left on that bond, I think, was a storm drain line to a storm pump, and the Wildcat improvements, we came up with an estimate and we submitted it to the city, oh my gosh, 4 years ago or 5 years ago when we initially finished those improvements, and asked for a reduction. And certainly we weren't granted one at that time, and I realized things were at issue, and so, appropriate or inappropriate, we are where we are. But I could come up with the number. I don't have it right here. I think that bond, I just don't recall off the top of my head what we thought it should be reduced to.
And so by freeing up that bond, it allows you to be able to use that funding, well, it's not a funding source, but that insurance source at another location? Is that?
No. It's simply a matter of your credit. I mean, it's like anything else. This is a contingent liability on our company because that's how you carry it on your books. And we've got bonding companies saying, hey, you've had a bond out there for 9 years. What are you going to do about that? And again, it's not a premium. The premiums are, they're considerable, but it does not rise to that occasion. It's just, it's proper business that you get rid of or you reduce your accrued liabilities.
Right. And thank you for sharing those comments with us and for answering my questions. For our city manager, with respect to the reduced bond amount, as Mr. Saro has stated, they had some conversation several years back, and they felt like they had made some improvements. Was there a request that was made of the city to reduce the bond amount?
I don't have the date, but I will suggest to the council that we would be happy to provide a closed session briefing to you on the topic of bonding release and dollar amounts associated.
Is there any further discussion from council on this item?
I would just share with you one additional thought, and that is this lien contract. It's widely used well beyond the valley. The county of San Diego, which is a rather large county and does a robust amount of land development, uses that as a mechanism. In many ways, it puts you in almost a landowner position. I mean, you don't have the obligation, but in essence, you've got a second trustee on the property. It cannot be developed unless those improvements are made. And so it really gives you a guarantee that a bond doesn't give you, because you don't necessarily need to chase a bonding company to get the improvement made. But you're right, if the property ultimately isn't developed, you've got an issue. What I would share with you here is you've got proximity. You got 96 flat lots in essence there that have a great market value when the market comes up enough to substantiate those activities. And I think it goes to your tone and tenor of the city. If you believe in your city and you believe that things will get better and prices will continue to rise, that would be the first location somebody would want to build.
Mr. Asaro, thank you. And you did clarify that point that we would be in a second position on that lien, so it would be a second trustee.
Well, your attorney would speak to that. We don't have financing on that, so it's you would put a lien contract that's not subject to financing, and in fact, if I went to put financing on it, it would be second to that obligation. I mean, that land is free and clear. It does not have a trustee on it today.
Thank you for your comments. I certainly would like to see your project moving forward. We have had a terrible experience in working with bonding companies, and so that's certainly a concern of ours. And and you have made mention that in other areas such as San Diego, they do use lien contracts, and I'm sure they do. But the concern here is that we are a small community. We're limited in staff size. We're limited in scope of knowledge with respect to some of these items. And so while other more robust cities may have an extensive background in working with these sorts of lien contracts, we don't. And so that's a serious concern for us. And we certainly don't want to be in a position to where we are landowners, because that's not the business that we're in. We provide city services, street improvements, water, sewer, and we're not necessarily in the position or the business of holding land. In fact, we've tried to release ourselves from some of the land that we currently own, and we've had a difficult time doing that. So there are some concerns here for me, and I know they've been expressed during the course of the discussion by other council members, but I certainly want to work with you. If there's some other form of protection for the city, even a reduced bond amount, and I'm not sure if that is exactly the item that is of most concern to you or not, but I can speak for myself is that it is. And so is there any other comments that would...
Mr. Mayor, I think it'd be really important, it's a really important goal to have, for the city to have that canal undergrounded.
Sure.
So I think really what council ought to do is direct staff to keep working and then bring this back probably as a closed session item. But because what the gentleman said, if we're talking about undergrounding that canal, it's going to make developing the rest of that a lot easier. And so I don't think we're at the solution, but it's certainly not time to stop trying.
And I appreciate that legal advice. So, and that's something we've talked about previously, so I certainly would be very open to having the city discuss that further with the IID and then bring it back to in closed session. So, and of course, we understand that we have every interest in making this happen quickly as well. So we don't want to sit on a project.
I certainly know that. I mean, staff and your city manager have been terrific in cooperating with us and brainstorming ideas.
Mr. Sorrow, and based on our comments here, I don't believe that we're going to decide to move forward with your proposal today, but it's certainly, we provided staff with direction, and we will make sure that we're moving quickly to address this. We want to see your project develop, and we want to see the area develop as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next item on the agenda, is that clear direction? The next item on the agenda is discussion potential action to authorize agreement with AE Consulting, Inc. to provide professional engineering and construction management services for the Brawley Municipal Airport Runway 26 and safety area improvements in the amount of $206,030.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council Members, Yasmina Arellano, Public Works Director. The scope of work that AE Consulting, Inc. will provide consists of professional engineering services for the preparation of plans, specifications, estimates, construction management, and inspection services. The project includes the relocation of runway 26, which is the runway that runs east-west, and by approximately 300 feet, so that the airport perimeter fence is outside the runway and safety area. The demolition of the end of taxiway B to line up with the new runway end. The creation of a blast pad at the end of the new runway end number 26. The relocation of lights accordingly. And regrading, drainage improvements, striping, pavement markers as necessary.
Is there any comments from council?
The only question I have, I'm sure this is a budget item and this is within budget, Jasmine?
Yes, sir. This is a budgeted, design is budgeted for this fiscal year.
Any other comments from council, questions from council? Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion.
Second. It's been seconded. I make a Councilmember Wharton made a motion. There's a second by Councilmember Couchman. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discussion potential action to award contract to A&R Construction for project number 2015-07 Storm Drain Inlet Replacement Project in the amount of $106,545. There was clarification at the inception of the meeting. It's from the Wastewater Capital Projects Fund. So.
Correct. The scope of work for this project includes the reconstruction of 9 storm drain catch basins throughout the city. The condition of these catch basins is most of them are collapsed. I don't know if you've seen the ones at the intersection of, south of the intersection of South Imperial Avenue and Mainland Street. There's an orange cone on top. That's one of them that we're going to be replacing. So these 9 are throughout the city. Some of them are collapsed, some of them, and all of them are in non-working condition. On February 24th, 5 bids were received with A&R Construction, a Brawley company being the lowest bid, at the amount of $106,545. The bid is considered reasonable and approval is recommended.
I make a motion that we approve this project.
I second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is
Thank you,
discussion
Jasmine.
potential action to approve the sale and consumption of alcohol on the city property located on South Plaza for the Cesar Chavez Community Celebration on April 11, 2015, from 2 p.m. to midnight.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Councilman. The Institute for Socioeconomic Justice has scheduled their annual Cesar Chavez Community Celebration April 11th at South Plaza. We're asking for approval to sell alcohol on public property at that time.
Is there any questions from council?
I think this has been a successful event that we've had in the past, and I support this request. I'll make the motion, we approve this request.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Lucha Libre, so.
Motion carries.
Lucha Libre.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 4I. That item has been removed from the regular business agenda, and just for clarification, that was asked to be removed by staff since the amount came in below the $15,000 limit. So that's been removed. The next item on the agenda is discussion potential staff direction regarding a social media use policy for city council members. And I had asked that city staff be included in that as well. So,
And Mayor Nava, we do have Shirley Benias here that may be able to assist with the discussion from the point of view of what social media policies look like for cities, how they're structured, and some joint powers insurance authority contact that we've had, as well as League of Cities contact.
perfect.
Honorable Mayor, Council Member Shirley Benias, Personnel and Risk Management. What I located on the website from California Joint Powers Insurance Authority is a template of a suggested template that the city could use for a policy. This policy pertains mostly to employees, and it's the general outline. It's a 5-6-page policy. It talks about the city's site, the government, the agency's Facebook page, the agency's Twitter page. It's not talking about personal employees' pages. So just for clarification, that's what I found on the website. And then I also located through the National League of Cities, through their Risk Information Sharing Consortium, some of the guidance and advice they give on social media as it pertains to employees and as it pertains to elected officials. Certain laws don't pertain to employees. 2 or 3 of us could gather, and it's not called a public meeting, where it's different for elected. 2 or 3 gather, and it's a public meeting.
Right.
And there's also California Records Retention Act that we have to pertain to on the city's website, and they can, according to the Risk Consortium, could also to a private website. So those are some things that I have researched and located for council.
Thank you. And our city attorney, I know you've shared your opinion with council, but could you reiterate the opinion that you have? We don't have a current policy in place.
Right.
There's some concern with the information that's being disseminated that may not be fully accurate. So that's the reason we're having this discussion. But we will be having a social media presence soon, and so certainly we want to address how we're going to interact with the public in that regard, but your opinion on other matters?
Well, there's two levels that you have to be concerned about. To the extent that it's a city website with comment section, a city Twitter feed, then you'll have to have a very tight policy.
Right.
Where things have to be, I would recommend that things have to be approved by management, and then some things have to be approved by council before they go out on something like that. You have to be very, very cognizant of Brown Act. You can have a serial meeting going on before you know it on a situation like that. With personal social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what have you, where I'm concerned the legal aspect is, first of all, is Brown Act, because again, you can have a serial meeting in minutes without even realizing it. One council member sees something on their own, chimes in, doesn't realize that two others have already chimed in because it's not showing up on the feed anymore. And then you violated the Brown Act and everybody's in trouble. The other thing is, you have to be very careful when you're using your personal Facebook, personal Twitter, personal whatever, that you, as council members, don't speak for the city unless you're authorized to speak for the city, because you're one of five. And when you're just speaking for yourself, that's completely different than, speaking for the city of Brawley. If you're going to speak for the city of Brawley, that means three of you have to concur and have to have already concurred that, yeah, this is what we're going to do. One thing that we haven't thought about, because we don't have any initiatives going right now, but we probably will in the future, is you have to be very, very careful if you're commenting about initiatives, especially if we have a city feed, because you cannot use city assets for campaigning. That doesn't mean if there's an important initiative the city needs passed that you can't bring it to the voters' attention, but that has to be vetted. It has to be, it's to the point where the city attorney almost has to write the statement for the city, because you can't use city resources to campaign at all. You have to be very careful if you're using a cell phone and you get a cell phone stipend and you're running for election and you're putting on your posts at your campaign, oh man, we're at the campaign barbecue and everybody come on down. If you're using your personal cell phone that you bought, but you got a city stipend, man, all of a sudden you're using city assets to campaign. You can't do that. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on, a lot of stuff you have to be careful of, but at the same time you have the First Amendment over here that says we can't restrict what you can say. So it's very, very difficult, but important, and it has to be done, especially if we're talking about an interactive website for the city. It's better to get that going sooner rather than later, because the disaster will happen before you know it if you don't. What I would urge people, especially with their personal stuff, is to really, really be cognizant of the Brown Act, really, really be cognizant of accuracy, and really be cognizant of I lost my train of thought. Just got off the Alzheimer's moment. But I think I just made all the points.
Sure.
But there you go. But that's where we're talking about. If we do adopt this, everything I read says it should be for city staff and for elected officials. And elected officials, of course, have to be much more careful than staff.
Certainly.
Because of the campaign financing regulations.
Thank you for that. Any advice that you would provide us would be greatly appreciated. And it's not to deter council members from expressing their opinions, but certainly, some of us are on social media, some of us are not. I'm not a participant on social media, but recently we've had a post from a council member that stirred up a lot of emotion and a lot of dialogue, which was not necessarily based entirely on factual information. So that's what triggered the calls that we were receiving. I know other council members did as well. And this is not intended to target anyone in particular, but it's a media policy that I want to make sure that we all abide by. With respect to social media posts, is there advice that you can provide us at this time, or is it a policy we should be following?
Well, what I would suggest with your personal social media, one, never ever speak for the city unless it's already been determined at a council meeting that, hey, like, I'll use an example, the Brawley beautification. You know what, you have a discussion at the council and you decide the motion's been made, we're going to really push this at all avenues. So yeah, get out there and say, I'm Mayor Nava, and I'm telling you, the city really wants you to get out there and clean your yard and paint, and we've gone to Imperial stores, go here, go there. You know, that's a policy that's been adopted. By all means, speak for the city at that point in time. Make sure that you're not violating the Brown Act. Don't go chiming in on each other's comments. Just make it a point not to do it. And don't get mad and call each other on the phone, because you call Donnie, Donnie calls Don. The next thing you know, there you go. You wait to the council meeting, and make sure what you're saying is accurate. We all read the probe. I think that's the only reason I even look at Ivy Press is the probe, because it's juicy. So make sure what you're saying is accurate.
I got other names.
So you don't get people riled up over nothing.
There's a probe item that's coming out with respect to this particular. Are there any other comments from council?
The only comment I had, I think you made it clear that if three of us responded to anything, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or whatever, you're basically saying that's violating the Brown Act. If somebody complained that three of us council members responded to some type of an ad.
I think that's for sure.
Yeah, I
Reading
think,
it's not a problem, but responding to it, because those comments become a discussion. You see it at Ivy Press, you see it on Facebook, you see it in Twitter. They become a discussion, and if three of you are in that discussion, that's a big problem.
yeah, I think that's the reason why I blocked everyone else except for one, so there wouldn't be three, so.
But I guess my point is this, that when we discuss things in the council meeting, and somebody specifically puts it on, say, Facebook, but we can't respond to that, or we can't say, well, no, that's not what we agreed, or that's not what we said, or I think that's where we pose a problem. My whole thing behind Facebook is it's more of a personal type discussion thing where you deal with personal issues. You post pictures, you deal with personal issues. My concern is when Facebook becomes something that a council member utilizes to notify the public or other things about issues, then I have a little bit of a concern about that, especially if it's something that we've discussed in a meeting, we haven't taken any action on, but it's a meeting discussion, but I can't comment about the post, because if I start commenting about the post, then we're all commenting about the post. That becomes possibly a violation of the Brown Act. So that's part of my concern. I think posting items, I mean, I don't personally utilize Facebook. I'm a Facebook member because I follow my son who's been in the Army, but I don't hardly post. I probably haven't posted 2 items in the 4 or 5 years that I've been on Facebook. I just don't do it because I don't, and I certainly don't post items about the city, because I just don't see that. Now, I know other people do, and I know that's a big method of communication, but as an elected official, I have to be very careful about that form of communication and how that takes, and what I say, because things can be taken wrong when I don't really mean it when I put it on Facebook. And so that's part of my concern. And so I just want us to all be very careful and be cognizant that some of the things you put on Facebook can come back and affect the entire city and the entire council. And I'm not sure that's necessarily our intent. I think it's just simply getting information out there. And I think an information thing is one thing, and then other things get out of hand. So I think that's my concern. I don't normally do it, and emails or things of that nature. So, I mean.
One thing I was remiss and I should have brought up is under no circumstances should anybody mention anything that happens in closed session on any form of social media.
Absolutely.
Or email or anything like that. Closed session rules are, everything that happens in closed session becomes public eventually at the time that's required. So don't be the one that jumps that gun, because it can, for example, it could violate an employee's rights.
Right.
It could cripple us in litigation. It's just really, a closed session is just completely taboo and off limits at all times.
Thank you for that.
And don't get me wrong, I believe everybody has positive intentions. I believe that everybody here has a positive intention, wants to put forth the best foot forward that we possibly can, and show everybody that the city's operating, correctly, and that we're doing our job. But I also believe that sometimes we get into this Facebook discussion, and you can imagine what it does. I mean, I see the city of El Centro right now in major issues, and that's all over Facebook media, and it's all over, and I'm not sure that's a positive thing.
Thank you.
If I can, my just personal comment, I'll be the one to admit here, I'm pretty avid Facebook cruiser, surfer, poster, but the only thing I would ask is just information's accurate. I think as a council member, it is incumbent upon us that the information we share is taken, in many cases, as gospel, as truth. And when, whether it be through misunderstanding, whatever the case may be, all of that I understand. We're all subject to that. When we put out information reference the city, it is just so important that it's accurate, because once the misinformation is out, it's very difficult to get back. And what ends up happening, in my opinion, is it has an opportunity to, I think, reflect negatively upon really all of us when the intentions were all good for all of us. So that's all I don't know if that could be managed through policy, but I will also say another thing. I think it's great we're having this discussion in a public forum, because where the tendency may be, you talk about Brown Act violation. This may be typically something that's discussed amongst, council members or individuals. I think we're the type of city that we see an issue. Let's discuss it out in the open. Let's discuss it with civility. Let's try to stick with the facts, and let's work together. I mean, I think that's really comes down to. It's not a personal issue. It's just simply, it's our responsibility as officials, I think, to do the best we can, which I really believe we do. I really believe we do. I don't think we're doubting that. So it's not an issue of an expression. It's not an issue of the, your amendments, the First Amendment right to freedom of speech. I think it's responsibility to be accurate in what we share with reference to city business.
And I will continue putting on Facebook whatever we have on the agenda, and I will try to do it verbatim as I take it off of the agenda. I did fail on one before. I did fail to put one word before potential, I think the word was potential, that I failed to put, and I do apologize for that. But I will continue to let our constituents here of Brawley know what it is on the agenda. And I will still continue to be on Facebook for the agenda.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and thank you, Councilmember Noriega. And I know it's been a touchy subject for everybody, and I know that I've gotten calls and emails and on both sides of the argument. But certainly, we encourage you to disseminate information. I try to do it as often as possible, whether it's an invitation for people to attend city council meetings or whatever that may be. But it's just a learning. It's a learning opportunity for all of us here too. So it's just something that we're having to face, and I appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Wharton's comments with respect to the fact that we do open these up in public session. We discuss it, even though it may be uncomfortable for all of us. But we do it in a civil manner, and we can sometimes disagree on things, but I think honestly we can all agree that we all have the best interest of the city at heart.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you for your comments.
I do use Facebook from time to time, not very much, and I did respond to that post, so I may be guilty of not knowing that.
Well, you won't be able to do that anymore. I blocked you. Sorry, but I did.
And I'll say this, I don't think for a minute that Councilwoman Noriega's did anything to try to jeopardize
Absolutely
council.
not.
I mean, I think what happens is sometimes people look at certain things, but my point on Facebook was, look, we don't have anything to hide. Come to our meetings. We can talk about those things, and we can talk about everything that's on the agenda, about the strategic planning meeting that we had, and it's something that happened, just like the mayor said, and we learn from it, and we don't take it personal. We agree to disagree, and we are family, and we move on from it. Okay?
Thank you. Comment?
Yes, I came here to speak on this. It looks like what I'm going to say, I've already heard you say, but I want you to hear from the public.
Of course.
My name is Gracie Fernandez. I'm here speaking for myself. My husband said I'm speaking for him as well. He's in LA. And if you know my husband, Bill Gallegos, he doesn't let me speak for him very often. Anyway, first of all, regarding the Brown Act, it's supposed to have the business of the city be a public information so that we know what's going on. We elect you to run the city for us, but a lot of the times we don't get any feedback. And we welcome the openness that Councilmember Noriega has given us through Facebook. I think it's awesome. Many businesses have Facebook pages, as you have found out. I did that research as well. And when they have policies, it is specific to those pages, not people's personal pages. There are people on Facebook from all walks of life, all ages, all occupations, and varied work experience and education. She solicited information from people in all those areas, and I think you should welcome that. I want to thank her for thinking out of the box and using social media to communicate with her constituents. We elected her to represent us, and it is refreshing to finally have a council member who actually wants to keep us informed and, more importantly, ask for our input and suggestions. I know she will not always like what is suggested or what is said, but at least she is open to hear it. How many times do we, the public, feel that our elected officials are not doing what we elected them to do? Except for this forum, sometimes we may see you at a social gathering, a mixer, whatever, and you got to work the room, and we're lucky to get a handshake and a hi, how are you? I haven't been asked by anybody else what's my input or what's my feelings on anything. And I also was going to address the First Amendment, which guarantees everyone, including council members, the freedom of speech, with the caveats mentioned by the attorney. Short of that, on personal Facebook, I think we need to be careful what you restrict there. Council members are elected to represent us, the citizens of Brawley. What better way to fulfill that commitment than by communicating with us and asking our opinions? We are all busy people. We have jobs and family obligations, and attending council meetings is difficult. So Facebook works for us. I don't post on Facebook. I don't go on Facebook. My husband does. 24/7. I can't get his attention. He's on Facebook. Anything interesting, he reads it to me. So that's how I get my information. He probably filters it. In closing, I want to say that if you do consider a social media use policy for city council members, as is stated on your agenda, I hope that it is your intent only to use that policy to remind all council members not to discuss confidential matters or matters of litigation, etc., as mentioned by your attorney. But do not limit or prohibit use of social media as a tool to keep citizens informed and involved in the business of running this city simply because you may not like what we say. Also, whatever can and cannot be said on social media should apply to all city employees, not just council members. Again, I'm not sure why this is listed pertaining only to council members. And again, we're watching where this issue goes, and just a little reminder that you're all elected at large, and we all will have an opportunity to vote for you again.
Ms. Fernandez, thank you for your comments.
Thank
and
you.
I did respond to your husband earlier today. He had several comments to share, and I believe I did address the concerns that he had. And I certainly, and I know I've worked with this council for many years. We all are very receptive to public input. That's never been a question of whether or not we want to hear negativity or we don't. Sometimes there's just times where we may disagree. And it's been mentioned here before, we do have a great responsibility in making sure that when we do communicate with the public, that we do provide accurate information and, certainly listen to your concerns. And I appreciate you coming in here and listening to our point of view as well, and certainly expressing your feelings. So thank you for that.
Luby Navarro, 671 South 18th. I just want to make a comment. A lot of people don't know what the agenda is. A long time ago, when I used to follow city council more than I do now, they always put the agenda in back then it was the Ivy Press. So people knew what was going to be said that night or the night before, they knew. So they have the opportunity to come in and state their opinions and whatever, you know. Now that there is no I feel that there's no communication between the city and the public aside from go to the website or come out here to the front, which is the only two that I know of locations that the agenda is printed. A lot of people don't have computers. A lot of people don't know how to get into that. I have a difficult time, you know, doing that, so I come in here. But a lot of people don't come in here. So I was just thinking maybe the city could start putting the agenda in our local newspaper, you know, pay for an ad and put it on there, or put it on the website where a newspaper website, because as you can see that you have a lot of empty seats, and aside and most of the people that are here are city staff. Very little public comes in. Reading the agenda that I have right now, I learned a lot just by listening. And by reading the agenda that I picked up 2 days ago, I learned what was going on. So I came. But a lot of people, now that they've got that social media, which I think it's okay, but sometimes it opens up a can of worms, you know. So I asked the city if they can go back to their old ways and put the agenda in a newspaper where people can.
Great suggestion, Mr. Navarro, and even if it's incorporating that idea, and again, you got to keep in mind that we will have an active Facebook page, an active Twitter feed from the city, so maybe that's another mechanism that we can use to post our agenda, and people could view it in that fashion. And you're right, the attendance is low at meetings unless it's a topic of discussion, right? And maybe not everybody's aware of what is going on with the city. We're making every effort to try and address those things, and we have for the past 12 months done that very aggressively. And it's also a good time to let you know, and you've heard it before, but we are having a town hall meeting this Thursday at 6 p.m. at the kiosk. It's outdoors, and it's really inviting all of the community of Brawley to come out. We haven't done that previously, so I want to make sure that those sorts of concerns, if you have them, raise them then as well, because I think it's important for people to hear it that may not be here today.
Has that been put in the newspaper or anything?
We have promoted it. It has been announced. Yeah, it's a public meeting, so it has been disseminated to the various news outlets.
There's signs that are up, were placed earlier this week, I believe Monday, that are for both directions of traffic on Main, indicating 6 p.m. on Thursday evening at the kiosk.
But, okay, well, I'm just saying, because communication is the best thing. If we don't have communication, we just get in trouble.
And Mr. Navarro, I don't claim to have all the answers to everything, and I appreciate the input, and I really do appreciate input. And anybody who knows me, and really this council, I think I speak for everybody, when you have an idea, please share that with us. If it's not something we can incorporate right away, then we will view it later. But if it's something that's a good idea that we can do and implement, we certainly are going to make every effort to do that. That's a good idea. I wish I would have thought of that 2 weeks ago, because with respect to announcing the town hall meeting, I want to make sure that our attendance is there, and I would encourage everybody to invite the public to be out there. But, we don't claim to know everything. We make mistakes just like all of you do. And we learn from them, thankfully. And I always say I try not to make the same mistake 3 times. Some people say twice, but I've made the same mistake twice many a times. So,
And we're also going to have music, Mayor.
And we're going to have music, Capital 64 Band, it's a Beatles tribute band. And so it should be a good environment to just casually talk with one another in a environment that's just not so static like a council meeting. So, again, thank you for your comments, and if you have those.
I think you will see a difference in attendance if you do put it in the newspaper.
I agree with you, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Desert Review.
Is there another?
Pardon me?
Is there another besides Desert?
Right. Well, Christopher just said yes.
Christopher,
Chris
just trying to get Lloyd to look up.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Yeah.
Oh, look, you got shot.
I just got shot.
See, that's what happens when you.
Anyway, being a member of the Chris Ferguson, well, yeah, whatever. Being a member of the Fourth Estate, the ones that are supposed to disseminate what's going on and tell the public. One of the things about Facebook and other social media is that, okay, it does get it out there. We all know the power of a good Facebook page. I am very well aware of Donnie's comings and goings on Facebook. I have seen more pictures of his sons than I have seen of my own family, but that's the story. One of the things that someone else mentioned, and I don't want to go into specifics, is that they're using Facebook from Helen and other people to find out what's going on. And being a reporter, and it is my job to disseminate information, it is also incumbent upon me to remind people that they do need to be proactive in what their elected officials are doing, because we have this situation out in the East Coast with the big buildings and all the old laws and the big piece of paper and all that, and people aren't keeping track of what's going on, and there are a lot of shenanigans going on. I had to use an Irish word, I'm sorry. So it is, it's a day.
It's a green day.
It's a bit of a long day for you,
Yes.
Christopher, it's all right.
So, I've heard that before. But it is, it is incumbent not only on the council to, let people know, hey, we're available, come talk to us. They have to make the effort to come to you and say, hey, these are our concerns. And as the mayor knows, I have sent plenty of emails concerning a particular project that's important to Brawley and that could be improved on, and now I need to send them to Don. But, it is also, you need to let people know, hey, we're open, tell us what your concerns are. But, you don't have to be the catalyst to do it. There are people who do need to keep track of what, their government is doing. So I would also, if there's any policy to be had, maybe subtly remind people that, hey, you know what, maybe it's not all on us. Yeah, we have to be accurate. We have to, keep conversations amongst the council and city staff to a minimum, if not completely zero. But, you also need to let people know that, we are open. Please, tell us what's going on. Maybe the mayor does need to start tweeting a little bit more. So I just wanted to emphasize that there is, it's good that you're trying to be open. I do agree that, publishing agendas, with certain restrictions and openness to, but it does need to be emphasized that, you are open. Okay, and now I'm going to go sit down and take a nap.
Mr. Ferguson, thank you for your comments. They're appreciated as always. And again, I just want to thank everybody for their expressions and what was discussed, to include all council members here. I know it hasn't been necessarily a pleasant encounter for us, but I'm glad that we made it through, and we'll work together to move forward. So we're going to move on the agenda. So the discussion and potential action direction to staff would be to further investigate maybe some policies that could be applied to city staff and the city council.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That would be, is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
All right. The next item on the agenda, city council member reports. Will begin with Councilmember Noriega.
I went on the 5th and the 6th of this month to the WELL conference, the Water Education Latino Leaders. There was people from all the way Northern California and even out of state. We had a few people from New York, Montana, different places that wanted to come down and see the Salton Sea. We were able to go on the bus and have a tour. We started from Palm Springs and went around 111, ended up in 86, and all the way back to Palm Springs. And, I've been here almost 64 years, and I've never been to the Sonny Bono place there, and it was very interesting. And I can say beautiful because you see different kinds of plants. It's a different scenery. They got to take us to the mesquite lake, places that I hadn't gone around here. And it might seem like, like they were ugly or whatever, but when you really look at what the potential is and what they represent and what it is that they're helping us with our environment, and not just with the plants, but also with our animals. And there's so many people, BLM, that took part in this conference. They talked about that 2000, I believe 17, the water will recede on Salton Sea, and it's really sad that they're going to stop, putting water in there. It's going to eliminate a lot of tourism, the young lady said, and they have a lot of people coming in right now. She said even with the smell, they don't care. But hopefully there's a lot more people putting out money, giving monies towards this Salton Sea project, and I think I've gotten a little more interested in it, that they're going to have other meetings that I will want to participate in that. Then on the following week, I went to the Energy Summit. A couple of us, Sam and the mayor were there. Again, there was different people from all over. They had a bus tour. I was 5 minutes late for the bus tour, so I missed it. Anyway, and the people that did go, they enjoyed it. They got to go around and see the, what do you call those? Electrical plants, geothermals, and they were very interested in that. A lot of them have taken back to where they want to build some geothermals in their cities. There at the conference, we had people from the valley talking about why is it so important to have the geothermals and the wind and the solar. The only problem with the solar is that I was really amazed that it takes so many people to make all these solars, and in the end, you only have 2 people that work there. So, in essence, in the end, it doesn't employ, a lot of people.
Sounds full.
Yeah, so there was a lot more that the discussions, we had different classes that we were able to go and sit and have some interesting talks with, especially with Mr. Stills, gave us a lot of information. That gentleman, Carl Stills, works very hard for all of us. I was amazed of people asking questions and how informative that gentleman is. There was also, where else did we go? Oh, and I gambled a little bit, Took a whole $100 and I spent it all, but then I ended up coming home with $350. So I did good at the very end. I put my last $20 and I won it back, and I said, let's go home. But anyway, I want to thank.
Half of that is the city of Brawley.
No, that was my hard-working money. But anyway, thank you to the staff for all the work that they've done. Today we had the luncheon and the recognition and all the prizes, wonderful prizes that were given out. Congratulations for your hard work and all your 20 years, or I forget how many, 15. We had 5 years, 15 years, 10 years, and I believe 25 years. So congratulations to all of you for everything you do for us.
Thank you. We'll move on to Councilmember Couchman.
Yes, I did attend the Energy Summit all 3 days. It was a nice Energy Summit. It wasn't, I don't believe, quite as well attended as it was the previous year, which was kind of a banner year for that event. But there was quite a few people there. Got to network with a lot of different people. As Helen has mentioned, a lot of the IID people were there. A lot of the solar energy, some, I don't know about the wind people, I think they were there also, and also a lot of the geothermal developers here in Imperial County. And I think we're kind of at a level in development where a lot of the projects are in place or moving into being in place, and there's not a lot of new development happening, but we're going to see some build out on quite a few energy projects here up into the 2020 time period. So we'll see all of that. But I thought it was a great event, and I enjoyed it. Farmers Market, I did attend that. It was a neat event, and I think there was some takeoff from the audience with the air show and competition. However, there were quite a few people there at the farmers market, and we always enjoy that event, and it's always a nice event, and I appreciate the city and the chamber and everybody else putting that event on. It really does work well, and it brings out the community at least once a month so everybody can see everybody and talk about city business, and there's a lot of communication that occurs at that. And also, we showcased a new stage for NOCA, which the Rotary Club locally sponsored. And so it's a really neat stage if you haven't seen it. We will be showcasing it, I think, in the next farmers market. I went to the Employees Appreciation Luncheon today, and that was a really nice event. I thought it went very, very well, and thanks to everyone who organized all that, and thanks to all the employees that were there. I thought it was a great event, and I did enjoy that. The food was good, and the company was good, and everything worked out really, really well.
Prizes were great.
And the prizes were great also. I didn't get to win any, but they were great. And I didn't win any money at the casino, so Helen took all my money and put it in her pocket and took off, I think. So that's the way it goes.
You warmed up the machine, though, and then when she sat down,
she jumped in and got it all, yeah. Okay, but that's all I have to report, so thank you all, and appreciate
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Just a couple of things. I attended the ribbon cutting groundbreaking over at Calapat, the sports complex that they opened the other night. Really, really nice complex. That community stepped up and passed a bond, and they built 2 baseball stadiums. They redid the football field, a new track and bleachers, and really, really nice facility. The community of Calapat did a real nice job with that. I really enjoyed that. I interact with Calapat kids quite a bit through Pop Warner because a lot of those kids come over here and play. They don't have a program over there, so it was nice to go over there and see that. Mr. Klein and his staff and those folks did a real good job with that. The Employee Appreciation Luncheon was fantastic as always. The food was good, company's good, had a good time, and the presents were nice. So I want to say thank you to staff and everybody that helps put that together, and folks really have a good time. I attended the farmers market. It was a little warm, but as always, the food was good, and just walking and mingling and visiting with folks and just visiting, it was really nice. It was a bit warm, but nice though. Other than that, things are pretty quiet. I thank staff for all that they do, and I just wish and pray that everybody's health and family and quality time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Councilmember Campbell. Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Yes, I attended the PMH Health Clinic ribbon cutting. It was actually very well attended considering the size of the lobby. I mean, we were packed in there. But it was a great event, a great chance to interact with the physicians and doctors that have made that possible, along with the staff that's associated with that health clinic. And congratulations again to PMH for moving forward and creating more access to health care for a lot of families. So, also attended Blue Angel Air Show. I do want to extend a thank you to IVEDC. I was able for the first time to enjoy what a VIP feels like by getting the pass to enjoy the air show from the chalet. You are up close and personal. I kind of been thinking all these years I've been going to the air show why I haven't taken advantage of that opportunity, but I'm usually out kind of cruising around and cooking on the main flight line, but to have a chance to be in the shade and enjoy some adult beverages, it was a good time. So again, thank you to IVDC. Also, staff appreciation, I think is already mentioned. I learned today that JJ's name is Joseph. I did not know that. After speaking of 25 years or 20 years of service, 23 years of knowing him.
I don't even think he knew his name.
I don't think he really remembered that.
I mentioned that because he was, I guess, the lucky winner of a helicopter flight around the city of Brawley. So usually what I try to do is take you over your house, or at least your neighbor's house, or whoever you want to look down at and enjoy a different view of the sky. So I look forward to doing that. I really think maybe it'll be a neat thing from now on with the staff that I'd surely like to offer out there. So congratulations to everybody on staff again today. It was a great celebration, and I really feel fortunate to be part of it, so thank you.
Oh, thank you for that. I also attended the employee luncheon. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity to MC the event, and congratulations to all the employees, all your hard work, all the department heads who were able to recognize your staff members. Congratulations to all of you. It was a good time. And it's really a good time to see everybody interacting with one another. It doesn't happen but once a year, really, because it's, everybody's in a different department. You don't necessarily work with one another, and so it was nice to be out there with our fellow council members. I took a tour of Allied Waste. They're lining 9 acres for their expansion project out there, and actually got to see it as the liner was being applied, and felt material on top of that. So we did another tour of the facility. I've done it in years past, but I'll tell you, the waste business is a complicated one. It's not easy. So I'm just glad that the city of Brawley's out of that business for sure, because it's highly regulated, it's very controlled, and you have a lot of liability out there. So from all accounts, they're doing a great job. I think we've had a very good working relationship with them, and I appreciate the opportunity to go out there and view what they're expanding on. So I believe that 9 acres would provide enough area coverage for about 15 years of disposal. So that's a pretty big area. Also attended the Renewable Energy Summit. The attendance was lower than in years past, but I also believe that's partly to do with the fact that many of the projects are already built out or they're in the queue. So, there was a lot of talk of geothermal projects, and we'll see what develops with that. Also attended the Pioneers Health Ribbon Cutting, and that was, as Mayor Pro Tem Wharton stated, it was tight quarters, but that only means that there was a whole lot of people there, and it was fun. So I'm glad to see that they're bringing resources to the city of Brawley. I believe the clinic is also going to be opening up a rural clinic as well. So I'm happy to see that both organizations are expanding their services. Attended an opening ceremony for Brawley Little League. My son is, I think, in the junior league now, so that's the older kids, and so that's probably his final year playing in that league. But a lot of families out there supporting their children. That's really great to see. And I would, again, like to remind you to please spread the word on the town hall meeting that we're having on Thursday. That's important. And last but not least, I want to thank our city treasurer, Mr. Jim Hamilton, for inviting me to attend with him at the fairgrounds. And it was various social organizations that gather for their meeting, and I appreciate the opportunity to be out there with you, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you very much for considering and bringing me along, so thank you. And that's what I have to report. I would like to hand it over to the city manager for her report.
3 brief items. The first is, if you haven't seen the work going on at the former Del Norte location, there was some overlay activity occurring today. It's really exciting to see the project continue to move forward, and the plan continues to be an April opening. So more to come on that front. Wanted to also share with you that early next week, the utility billing insert for the next billing cycle will again highlight the Brawley Beautiful initiative, but this time we will not only advise our customers on our local partnership with Imperial Stores, but also highlight bulk item free, no-cost services tied to our Allied Waste contract for bulky item pickup. And so the goal is to encourage people to use it instead of placing it in other locations that become problematic for the city. So please keep an eye out for that. We'll be working feverishly to produce several thousand copies in time for the utility billing insert. Last but not least, I wanted to provide a brief update on regional animal control related efforts. The county will, in the next week or two, be preparing an item for Board of Supervisors action that has to do with engaging the consultant to assist with moving forward with a survey of likely voters relative to the topic of support for regional animal control services. So I'm guessing that will get some airtime with local media, as it is a topic that is very regularly being featured in our local newspapers. Also want to note that there is a small-scale demonstration being undertaken in our city limits, but the county is taking the lead, and it is a feral cat program in one of our neighborhoods right here within city limits around the Sunset Drive neighborhood. It is a catch, spay, neuter, release program. Gary Wyatt is spearheading it for his neighborhood. And basically, the intent is to gather neighbors who are concerned about these colonies of feral cats that develop. They will be working to place traps on private property, and the county animal control staff will come and retrieve the animals, schedule spay and neuter at Dr. Satow's in Imperial, have an observation period for the proper healing of the animal, and then release back with a clipped ear the feral cat that no longer has the ability to reproduce. If you see, I imagine there's going to be some interest in this topic in our community, and I will be working with Public Works where the call's likely to come because of our own animal control officer being as active as he is. Will be prepared to provide information and resources on this
a lot of bloodshed.
approach to addressing feral cats.
It's true, though.
And with that,
I
that's
can
the
imagine there's going to be a high
Thank you.
level of bloodshed. I think you have to by all parties. I mean,
Well, you know, it is a real problem.
know it is.
There is. Our next report is our treasurer's report. Nothing to report, other than he invited me to the fairs. So,
Yes, there you go.
Thank you. City attorney's report.
There's a lot of stuff going on, none of it very exciting, but there's a lot. I'll give a plug to my wife. Two of her students won Reserve Grand Champion and High Point Ribbon at the fair for her painting. The other one won Grand Champion for hers, both Brawley girls. And if you didn't make it out to the art walk on the 6th, it was really good. And they're going to do it again on the 3rd. And there's adult beverages at DS Arts. We don't have a liquor license there for our guests, so by all means come in.
I'll be your guest.
Yeah. But it was a good event and well attended.
Fantastic.
But last time we didn't have any of our own art because it was all at the fair, but this time all these great paintings and sculptures will be on display at the studio.
What ages does she have?
All ages, from little kids up to retired, a lot of retired ladies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that report. City clerk?
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. And council member or Mayor Pro Tem Morton?
10 seconds, yes, 10 seconds, Mr. Mayor. I will be in Sacramento tomorrow at the state capitol for some company business, so I guess personal company business. But I'm going to make an earnest effort to make a presence for not just Brawley, sounds like Imperial County, with the exception of IID on the Salton Sea workshop. So hopefully I'll be able to do that, and I'll certainly report back.
Fantastic. Great news.
If I may just clarify for a moment, this is the State Regional Water Quality Control Board holding a workshop on the impacts of changing water levels at the Salton Sea. I have furnished Mayor Pro Tem Wharton with a copy of the comments that were submitted, and his bullet points will be within the framework of that communication.
Thank you for that.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I know you hate to hear this question, but how are we doing on the J Street? And the reason I ask is I had several people wanting to know if they could buy the house.
Oh, well, the judge did say that we can sell the house, and I've prepared the order, and it's, as far as I know, still sitting on the judge's desk. So I send my runner over every day to find out where it is. But I'm not allowed, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to call the judge and say, hey, hurry up and sign that. We're not allowed to speak to the judge unless it's a scheduled hearing. But it'll come shortly, I'm sure. And I expect it'll come this week. And then there are a lot of people that want to buy it.
Yes.
And what I would urge you to do is just give them my contact information, and I will forward them right to the receiver, which I've done in the past, because he's the one that'll have to take the bids to the court for approval.
Fantastic.
Interesting.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to take a 2-minute break. How about that? And then come into closed session. Thank you.
Oh, I know.